Hello, thank you for joining us. This is Brave New History. We're here with Gnostic Quran, YouTube channel by the same name. And you'll never guess what we're here to talk about. Gnostic influences on the Quran. Or I guess
Yeah,
we should preface it by saying possible, because that's what
yeah, it's
um,
all conjectural, but well, when we talk about the religion, it's always gonna be conjectural some way. So,
absolutely. So, yeah, how have you been?
well, we have not seen each other for a long time, but this time I was dedicating to my translational works, and
Hmm.
I'm currently making the translations of the so-called Meccan surahs, the early surahs, even in the uh, established Muslim orthodoxy, which they just distinguish between these two types of surahs. But
Hmm.
most probably it just well, if we do accept this distinction, it's not just only because the Sunni orthodoxy says so, but because this two types of the source are so distinctive. And if you especially know Arabic, you can see this two writing hands in the Quran, the two authors. That one author is like very poetic one. He knows the poetry. He knows how to make the stuff rhythmic, and
Yeah.
the other one who cares about more about like some history, about fusing the narrative with a like with what's happening outside, and by outside I mean the 7th century, possibly Arabia, but maybe some other geographical place. Yeah, and I was just yesterday done this reconstruction of the so-called Surah Abu Lahab, which I identify as some Manichaean material, probably written in some mixed. I wouldn't call Syriac. I would probably say that it was some Parthian material which was translated into what we know as Arabic, as and because of the presence of Parthian loanwords in this surah, especially with the beginning, because surah begins with the Tabba Yada Abi Lahab, and this Tabba, it's non-Semitic. You won't find this particular root word in anywhere in Semitic languages, but in the Parthian and overall in this kind of Indo-Aryan languages, Tabba just simply mean the heat, shine, and the whole surah is circling about the fire. Even the name of Abu Lahab just simply mean the father of flames. Yeah, you may ask how the Manichaean material is ended up being in corpus, but it's the answer will come up when you actually discuss the content of the surah. Traditional story says that Abu Lahab was an uncle of Muhammad. There's some sort of a bad uncle because there's distinction in not only in the Sunni but in the 12 sources that there was a good uncle, Abu Talib, and from his seed, basically from his lineage, the Ali goes on, the successor, the Imam, the whom she believe should be the first Imam instead of Abu Bakr, and the bad uncle, who is the Abu Lahab, who was against the Muhammad, who was just totally against his new message, which was for him incompatible with his local Arabic paganism, what is called Qurayshi paganism. And I don't, well, this trope itself that there's like two one good uncle, one bad uncle. It could be just a literally trope, in a sense, to present this kind of idea that there's the bad descendants of Muhammad and there's the good one. And the bad one would be obviously associated with the Umayyads, with the Bani Umayyad, the later rulership after the so-called Rashidun, rightfully guided caliphs. There's 4 caliphs of the first caliphate, the righteous caliphate. But yeah, I see it more or less like the Abbasid propaganda, because it was the propaganda back in the day during the Abbasid times to just spill every possible evil word against the Umayyads in order to disqualify them as the legitimate rulership, because part of the Umayyad dynasty will survive after the so-called Abbasid revolution. Abbasid revolution would not just trample the previous authority and leadership. Some of this leadership will be still present in the Spain and the Muslim Spain and in North Africa. But yeah, as for the real content of the surah, you need to delve deep more into Arabic, and yeah, some words absolutely make zero sense in Arabic, probably. As I said before, Parthian loanwords. Overall, surah is about this father of flames, Tabbat yadi Abi Lahab, meaning if we translate this tab, which by the way is used very often in Manichaean scriptures, because tab meaning to grow hot, to have a fever, because in ancient days it would be associated by the people with this fever with some like inner flames. They wouldn't delve deep into biochemistry and stuff, yet. So the translation of the first verse would be growing hot the hands of the father of flames, and Abu in Arabic, it doesn't necessarily mean the father. It could also mean the governor, like Abu Bakr, for example. It's not the father of the Bakr. It's more likely to translate the governor of the Bakr, and Bakr was the one of the biggest Arabic tribes in Mesopotamia, by the way, by the time of the 7th century, not in the northern Saudi Arabia. And Abu Lahab could simply be the governor of the flames, and this is very similar to the Zoroastrian religious clergy in the Sasanian times, because the chief Mobat, the general, like this kind of highest priest, the Mobaden Mobat, as it in the Persian, it's the some sort of copy from the Shahenshah, the Shah of the Shahs, and this is like the priest of the old priest. It could be mean this Abu Lahab, that he would govern this fire temples, which would be all across the Sasanian realm. And very often in Manichaean literature, which you can find in many different locations, there was like big excavation in Egypt where this Colonia Mani Codex was found, and it is in Coptic. The other collection was found, as far as I know, in the Turfan. This is I can recall what kind, but Uzbekistan or current day Afghanistan, as far as I know. And there's a whole bunch of collection of Manichaean materials in Parthian, in Manichaean script itself were found. And very often you see that very negative stance against the fire worship in the in this material, because Manichaeans themselves would consider this to be the idolatry, that they betrayed the original they, I meaning the Zoroastrian orthodoxy. I don't know how to call it, because
Mhm.
who knows what they believe to, but I'm not so sure that even during Sasanian times they were strict dualists, because obviously today the Zoroastrian orthodoxy, which is called the Mazdayasna Zoroastrian tradition, or Verdini, is present themselves, at least in public, as a dualist. But back in the day, there's a lot of stuff with the Mithraism. It's all intertwined in some way. Even the fiery temples, the name of these temples is Dare Meher in the Persian, which basically means the house or the door of the Meher, of the Mithra. And Mithra being the god of not only Iranian pantheon, but also the Hindu pantheon, is associated with a fire and with a sun. Of course, the different type of sun, but well, that's the matter of different discussion. But
No, with that, no, like the Hindu and Zoroastrian style Mithraism, very different from the Roman, right? There's almost no
yeah,
connection. Would you agree with that?
I think there would be connection with some portion of the, because even the celebration which Roman would take later on, it just straight away from Navruz, this kind of New Year, Persian New Year. So there would be connection, but I don't think it's right to say that this is just similar tradition. Definitely Roman Mithraism would be more like Hellenized version, when they would try to Hellenize this kind of Persian aspect. You can
Mm.
also see it about the Christianity, but yeah.
Like, how do you figure with Christianity?
Some Mithraic stuff, it's inside of Christianity, which even the not the baptism, but the Eucharist, definitely, I think, coming not from the local Roman traditions, but definitely from some Persian religion, which was back in the day.
Mm.
Maybe not Persian, but Mesopotamia, definitely, like Medes, this kind of the third branch of Iranian people, which often forgotten. We often
Mm.
talk about the Persians and Parthians, but the Medes, which maybe one of the ancient Iranian people who inhabited Mesopotamia, like long before the like Achaemenid rule. And yeah, and there's clear distinction between this like Iranian version of the Mithraism and Roman one, but they would be overlapped, because, well, the origins, it's hard to tell that Mithra was the Roman deity. It's definitely borrowed from this Indo-Aryan heritage. So
Yeah, and you wonder, like within, the Persian and Hindu, there's no Tauroctony scene ever, right? There's no.
well,
It seems so different, right? That, and I mean, like, what is even going on? Like, I don't know the origin story of Mithras in
mm,
Hinduism, but he's like born from a rock, in
yeah,
the Roman style, and then he stabs a bull. A lot of people say he doesn't kill it. He
yeah.
stabs the bull, and then he ascends to the sun god because I don't know what's going on. I don't know if we know, but I thought he was the chief deity. And like, what's he doing being born from a rock? I thought he's supposed to be eternal, right? I don't know, but it seems strikingly different, doesn't it? Where I just think
Mm,
in Hinduism,
right.
it's just the god of the sun, no?
Yeah, it's just one of the
Yeah.
Adityas, one of this kind of good good titans, and he is just one of this very different list of the sun deities in the Hindu pantheon. There's tauroctony in the sense in Hinduism, but it's associated with a Durga, and Durga is often depicted as the goddess who slays the devil bull, and but when she slays actual bull, this devil like goes out of this wound which Durga made with her like spear, because spear would be
Mhm.
later on associated in many different pantheons, and I think even in Iran this Anahita deity is somehow connected with the Hindu pantheon. And even Mithra himself is in Iran is most likely seen to be the hermaphrodite, not particular male. Yes, there's a female form of the Mithra, and yeah, but the whole born out of rock, I think it's just misconception, because often it's depicted not the rock as I see it, but the branch of the tree, of this evergreen tree. So somehow associated with this I don't know, this type of trees for some reason. And
Mhm.
well, evergreen trees are now being the part of the Christmas, and because of its origins in Iranian mythology, I think. Uh, so yeah, you can make the equation between the Roman Mithraism, definitely, but it's like hard to tell, with so much time passed on. Like they would
Yeah,
just make up stuff during this this period. It's like 500 years this religion was developing. It's not like
yeah,
some little speck like religion for 30, like for 10 years.
yeah.
It's a long
You
history.
know, it just occurred to me right now where, the Troctony scene, the bull slaying scene, right?
Mhm.
For anybody that's not familiar, there's a scene within Mithraism where Mithras is stabbing,
Mhm.
on the upper part of the bull's front leg,
Yeah,
near his neck, but it looks like a little bit near the
yeah.
upper part of his leg. And that's the main scene for it's like in the very front of the Mithraeum,
Mhm.
or the Mithraea, I think is the plural. Like it's a Mithraic chapel,
Yeah,
right? They have these chapels everywhere. In the front of it, like they'll have like an altar maybe, then behind it, always a Troctony scene, always this bull
yeah,
slaying, and it'll have other things around it. And it's like that's where like a crucifix would go in a church, right?
yeah, exactly.
And it's interesting. It just occurred to me right now. We have Christ being slain in the crucifixion scene. There's like, a stab wound. He's
Yeah, isn't there? He's
often
bleeding.
depicted as,
Yeah.
yeah, stabbed with a spear, and like he has that thing. You wonder, I mean, this is maybe parallelomania that I'm drawing connections where there aren't any, but you wonder, there's like a human being slain,
Mhm.
whereas there's a bull being slain in the other, or
Yeah, but
you wonder if there's
there's
any connection.
different interpretations of the Storoctany. It's more like Iranic one, that this just originate overall from this Timaeus myth about the world generation, because Mithra representing this light, this godly light, slaying the bull, and bull would represent this Tiamat, this dragon of chaos, this amalgamation of matter, just called the Hyle in the Greek. Uh, he perceived this darkness, and through this union of light and darkness, the world emerges, and the this kind of uh, devilish animals portrayed: the scorpio, the dog,
Mhm.
the hydra, the snake. They all represent this kind of ahrimanic nature, animals, like evil ones. And they're against the creation of the Armust, against the creation of Ahura Mazda. But yeah, there's other explanation proposed not so long ago about this whole scene being more like a star map, that the Mithra represent the precession of the equinoxes, and he's slaying the bull, meaning this there's going this transformation of astrological era from this era of Taurus to the era of Pisces, and even this creatures appearing on the scene, they representing the star map during this kind of transitional stage, because exactly this not animals, but zodiac would appear. The Scorpio, the Hydra, and the Major Canis. And sometimes on Tauroctony, the Raven would be also presented. So yeah, but even if we see in the Mithraeum is more like the Christian church in a sense. There's like this kind of long hole, and this hole represents the journey towards the final goal. And there's like this kind of 7 grades which you pass through, and at the entrance there's the first grade, and at the end where the Tauroctony scene would be presented, that would be the 7th grade, the highest grade. So maybe there's a parallelomania, as you said, but it's too distinctive, I think, like, because maybe even the myth itself, but that the animal would be replaced with a human. Like, what kind of a sick mind? Like, but yeah, I don't see this even in some Gnostic tradition. Because if I would see this kind of idea that Jesus represents this matter, and the whole crucifixion story is about the world generation, but I don't know, maybe because even in some Gnostic schools, Jesus would be identified with a Metatron, with this kind of creational divinity. He's basically would be this beardless guy sitting on the throne, which some sages would would go into this divine realm in they like visionary experiences. But yes, yeah, I just never thought about this parallel, to be honest.
Yeah, which, yeah, you wonder, like, I mean, I'm, not necessarily convinced of it, but, I forget which epistle it is where they talk about the armor of faith, putting on the armor of faith. And there's a lot of stuff about like the spirit, about breath, right?
Yeah.
And then we have the so-called Mithraic gospel, which is one of the only written texts we have on Mithraism. And it reads so much like that epistle. I don't remember which. Are we in Colossians? I might be off, but it reads like they talk about putting on armor, right? The Mithraeus. And Paul is from Tarsus, where is the epicenter of Mithraism, right? And we have like so many similarities between the two.
It's
It's a
interesting
wonder.
about the armor, because even in the Manichaean tradition, there is a belief that, like, well, when these good guys come to the heaven, they would be gifted with this kind of light shining mantle. But I don't know. Even in Islam, in the Quranic text, you can see that the believers would be granted with houris, and it's often identified with this kind of virgin wives in the heaven, and with
white
different,
grapes. White grapes. Yeah.
Well, I'm not so sure, to be honest, that it's white grapes, because there's so much parallel with the Manichaeanism, like white grapes. Every time I see it, every time I hear it, like it's almost like some agenda trying to identify Quranical text with the Orthodox Christianity for some reason, as Orthodoxy was the only one to write on Syriac. It's like, what? There, Syriac was the lingua franca back at the day. The Marcionites, the Manichaeans, all Gnostic sects would probably use the Syriac. And Gnostic themselves, Gnostic tradition is a literary tradition. Just because we don't have any material, it doesn't mean that they were oral, like the modern day Yazidis, for example, who doesn't have any scripture. Just because the church did their best to destroy any traces of this tradition, that's why we don't have anything. But yeah, even in as far as I know, in one of the Manichaean manuscript, they're described as the black-eyed, this divine ladies of heaven, maidens of light, as often they described in many epistles. Dianas, it's probably borrowed from this Iranian myth of the divine psychopoms, which appears in the surah Abu Lahab, from my perspective. Yeah, like what we were discussing, I just digressed a little bit. You're discussing about Mithraic gospel. I first time hear that.
Yeah, well, let's see about, I mean, in the broader context of, Manichaean influence on the Quran. And then I brought up, similar between Christianity and Mithraism. But, with the whole, so you brought up in Manichaeanism, there's the putting on the mantle, right? Now, if you know the hymn of the pearl, that's a major part of it, putting on the mantle. So you go down to Egypt, get the pearl, come back, we'll put on a mantle, and you can be co-heirs with your brother.
Yeah.
Right? And it's about, like, I'm not exactly sure what they're talking about by the mantle.
Divine short or something, like even this kind of Joseph story in the Bible, it's more about this kind of short, and it could represent something like that, I think, because it plays an important role in Sufi tradition, whereas this short would represent basically the same idea, that do not put like the usual clothes, but the clothes of righteousness or something like that. Yeah.
And along the lines of just going all full parallelomaniac, that you wonder, no one's proposed, maybe because it's pure crazy talk, about how they talk about Mithras on the outside. He is causing the procession of the equinoxes, right? Nobody ever proposes that's Jesus, as far as I can tell. Right? So that would be really where to look for similarities, right? But that's not quite it. And if some Muslim commenter somewhere says, it's Jabril that causes it, right? That would be amazing. Although we don't really see that. So maybe, I don't know, maybe we.
Yeah, because there's so much influence on Neoplatonic influence on even the Sunni Orthodoxy, so-called. The Asharis, the Sufi Asharis would be like closely affiliated with this Neoplatonic ideas. But to answer your question, I don't really know. I think that's more or less how you see the text. Well, because translations are bad usually of the Quran. They're not just bad, they're very bad. Like they just it's just butchering the text, to be honest. It's like, let's insert our correct theology into the text, and like words just dropped, words added, clauses changed, the feminine transformed into masculine or plural. Like, it's just a mess, like, to be honest. And of course, etymology itself, when it just doesn't match up with this other Semitic languages, like where in the all sister languages, like in Hebrew and Aramaic, this particular root word would mean one thing, but in Arabic suddenly it just transforms into like other dimension meaning. Like, it's just not even comparable. Or yeah, like, but I'm just my little rumble about this, because the whole this translation work is just so time consuming, because you're trying to connect the dots, like where this word even coming from. It's not Semitic, but yeah. What do you ask? I'm just sleepy still.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, no, with like translation, it's always a tricky thing where
Yeah.
if you're familiar with Dr. Tabor, he is coming out with I forget what he calls it, but it's like a straightforward reading of the Bible, not putting in the meaning. And the similar stuff happens with the Bible, right? Where there's some parts of it that just make no sense, and we actually don't know what the original word was, right? Like, a good example is that prayer, "Give us this day our daily bread." We put the word daily in there
And
because
it's
that
not.
makes sense, but we have it appears nowhere else in Greek literature. Give us this holy bread, give us this, I don't know,
I
stale
see.
bread, we don't know.
And he's
It's
more about the Greek, this Tabor guy, or is
he's
more
more
about,
about like,
or
we'll
Hebrew?
see it all the time where we translate this one word this way here and another way here and a totally different way there. And sometimes it's complete phrases that reappear, but we translate it differently each time, right?
I see.
And like there's idioms that are not but it's translated. It's, yeah.
This is not a big problem for Greek, I think, as well. In Greek, there's there's actual there's how is it in English? I don't recall, but the the all letters of the alphabet is presented. It's not like in Arabic, where you only get the second one. I just don't. I don't have a big knowledge in English, unfortunately. The consonants. Yeah, that's what I meant. And because Hebrew would be similar to Arabic in that sense, and I'm just not so sure that if there is any diacriticals in the Hebrew, because I'm very skeptical towards it. And even in the beginning of the Bible, there's already mistranslation, because the God created basically heaven and earth. The first verse of the Bereshit, right? This kind of story of creation. The word is used bara. Bara means separate. It doesn't mean create. It means the separation between the two things. The God separated the waters, this kind of heaven from the earth. And you can go on and on. I think it just the different type of theologies would appear in Judaism. They all would be trying to insert their own vision, their own type of idea, what the God is. And that would just butcher the text. And I think the same happens in Arabic. Definitely.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's a big problem, diacriticals, because there's no dots, there's no anything like that in the early manuscripts, and at least in the Quran. I don't know about the Bible, but well, if the James Tabor, like the often time when the Yahweh translated as the Lord, what kind of nonsense is that? Translate that correctly. Yahweh means Yahweh. Doesn't mean the Lord. Like, yeah, it's just the more or less the policy game going on.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, and if you're familiar, the Jehovah's Witnesses,
mhm.
you know, Yahweh or Jehovah,
Yehovah.
it's
Like,
it only
some,
appears in the Old Testament. It doesn't appear in the New Testament.
yeah.
But Jehovah's Witnesses, they love the name Jehovah, so
Mm.
they put it in the New Testament, and they say that this is a rendering of what was actually
Yeah.
meant, not what the text says, which is kind of a
Yeah.
little bit funny. Like,
Like, come on.
okay,
Yeah, but I don't know, because to be honest, the Jehovah of the Isaiah and the Jehovah of the Genesis or Exodus is just different Jehovahs, like at least in the ethics. Like, because the Jehovah of Isaiah doesn't need your sacrifices for some reason. Like, whilst the Jehovah of the Exodus, there's the whole list of how you should perform the sacrifices, like this Mosaic laws about the tabernacle.
mhm,
How would you perform this kind of Kohanim religious practice in Exodus, while they don't have the actual temple. They have this kind of nomadic
mhm.
mobile temple or some sort of stuff. Like, it's just, and you may wondering, maybe some guys later on just added this Jehovah to the Isaiah. Like, maybe there's some different dude was laying back at the day.
Yeah, and then in Genesis 2, uh he's walking around in the cool of the day, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Saying, okay, you can eat from any tree except for that one right there. He just seems like a cool guy, just showing them around the garden that he made for them, right? And then in
yeah,
Genesis 1, he's this cosmic deity that just creates the universe out of nothing. He's never described as having form.
yeah.
He's
More
like just speaks
impersonal.
things. Yeah, and he just seems like a disembodied voice that just does everything, right? And then Genesis 2, he's a person walking around in the cool of the day in the garden,
Mhm.
just very local.
Mhm.
And then in Exodus, I don't
He's
know how to
like,
describe it, like some kind of
titties.
deranged,
Yeah, it's like
like,
like theophany, like it's often said. It's just, yeah, it's just a mess. And in order to like somehow explain it, you just say, oh, the God is multi-personal. Like, God is the mystery, basically. God is the
yeah.
Trinity in that sense. The Trinity model would have been built in order to explain this kind of
Well,
the
I
different
mean,
personalities which appears in the Old
that would
Testament.
be modalism, which is, they say a
Yes,
classical heresy. So anytime you talk about the Trinity, if you really say anything at all, it's heresy. You
yeah,
have to say like God in
but
three
it's
persons.
like developed heresy because I'm not very convinced that the early Christian church father would be defending the same Trinity the Christians today holding, because there's just the whole history about this Trinity, how this doctrine developed throughout the time. But
Mhm,
yeah, and the Trinity itself, just a triad, which were everywhere in Gnostic writings and
mhm.
Valentinianism. And Valentinus was the first to propose this idea, and I think it's more or less combatant stance against the dualists, because he basically says that, well, there's the Sophia and where's this demiurge, which comes from the Sophia, and
Mhm.
Sophia obviously would be identified with a Mary, and the demiurge with a Jesus. So you just solve the puzzle that Jesus is the demiurge. Like, Jesus, the demiurge is the good guy. Okay, he's not bad one. We don't need this dualistic stuff here. And later on, it would be just adopted. But metamorphosized throughout the time, obviously, because there's the whole different schools going on. There's Antiochian school, which more in line towards this idea that Jesus had this real body, a real human body, and Alexandrian school, which would be more ascetic. No, Jesus is a pure divinity. Like they're just blaspheming, and you need to somehow unite that in order to bring this realm of Roman Empire into this lands. So there's the politics behind the development of the theology. Let's be honest.
Yeah, I'm inclined to think, and this is like just throwing it out there, that probably early Christianity was very Platonic, right?
Mhm.
And it could have been that the earliest Christian Christology was
Mhm.
more Platonic, right? Where
Mhm.
we have this emanation from the monad,
Mhm.
where it's like not full on Gnostic,
Mhm.
but like I could so see, well, just like a lot
Mhm.
of the early schools believe that there's the monad is the father, right?
Yeah, well, I'm
And,
just saying that this Alexandrian school, more or less, even it's evident in Philo's work, who was the Hellenized Jew, and he presented the Neoplatonic models. uh, I think like somehow it's like maybe merged out of Egyptian religion back in the day, like this kind
yeah.
of Neoplatonic ideas. But Middle East remained to be more dualistic because of the Zoroastrian influence. Obviously, you can't just deny that Persia out of the history, it was like gigantic empire, and it wouldn't allow different type of think, different type of ideology in their realm. And this kind of idea born out this dualism where the Jesus have this two divine natures. Basically, there's the good nature in Christ, there's the good will, fatherly will, and there's bad nature, this fleshly will, which would be associated with the devil, obviously, and
Mhm.
Nestorianism and Manichaeism, and that you can reconcile that with with a Platonic idea, where the world is it's utterly monistic in the sense it's just you can't merge it together with the Zoroastrian dualism, but
Mhm.
we see exactly this in the history of the Trinity, where this church father tried to merge it, like explain somehow that it's not so apparent, this differences between the dualism and non-dualism. And well, we can say that exactly the same thing about the Hindu tradition, because Hindu philosophy would be circle around this fact about the Dvaita and versus Advaita, about this dualistic notion of God and non-dualistic one. So it's not purely problem raised up from the Christianity, but I can see your argument that like maybe because maybe Jewish writers were more Neoplatonically inclined, and you can say, well, Christianity born out of the Judaism, hence the
Mhm.
Christianity is more Platonic, more Hellenistic religion. But who knows? Like because
Yeah.
so.
I'm kind of less inclined to really think that there's much Judaism in Christianity,
Mm,
where
mm,
I think it's, Judaism was in vogue back in the day. And it's just like
mm,
Mithraism in Rome, where Mithraism, foreign stuff that's exotic and exciting, right? This ancient religion from afar, let me tell you about that, because you have to be in the special club and you have to be so cultured, and you have to know about all these foreign stuff. And I think that's what Judaism was kind of about, right?
yeah,
But you add, I mean, it's essentially there's no Judaism to it really, or hardly any, right? It's all Hellenized. And that's where Christianity was, where we think that it really came from Judaism. That was the story that they wanted to give you to sell it to you, right?
yeah,
Or, I mean, that's just my speculation. But
yeah.
let's say it was Jewish, right? And, you want, like, let's say there was Kabbalistic studies, right? They had the tree of life and all the Sephiroth that are aspects of God. But this is complicated, right? It's not really going to catch on because there's so much going on. Let's just make 3 Sephiroth, and we'll call it Father, Son, Holy Ghost, and then we'll give that to the masses. Just like we sell chakras to people, that it's actually a lot more profound and it's not that sellable, but
Yeah.
we'll make it sellable. And maybe that's where we came from.
Yeah, I like seen witness in Russian social media where there's some sort of group of the ex-Eastern Orthodoxy who became Gnostic, and they would defend wholeheartedly that the early Jesus teaching was it was completely different stuff from the Judaism. It's just incompatible, basically. They would defend the idea that the Galilee themselves was the pagan, more or less, I would say, there is no big evidence that the Jews ever been in Galilee, that it's more a mixed culture, where this Galilee, at some point of the history, the Jews were expelled from there, and the local population from the Assyria were moved there. And that was the practice of the Achaemenids back in the day, when they were not just Achaemenids, during even in the Sasanian times, it's still present, this kind of Stalinist expulsion, like get the hell out of your land, like you're making a mischief in this land. But there was the whole debate within this, like the woman representing this idea and one of the Eastern Orthodoxy priest, and he was like very modernized. It's just like Jay Dyer or something like that. And he gives a good argument that they're actually the synagogues in the Galilee. But when we actually, and I check out the synagogues, when we witness the synagogues, they are so Mithraic, like there's this kind of solar deity at the center, in the mosaics at least, and this zodiac is circling around him. And there's the menorahs on the walls. There's no doubt that this is synagogues. It's just hard to tell, because we just assume there was some orthodoxy back in the day. Just dudes will come up with their own religion based on the local tradition circling around them. But to answer your question about the Neoplatonic influence, I think the best argument for saying that Christianity came out from Judaism is to say that Judaism itself is the Hellenized religion. You don't need to say that, that's just spooky religion from the barbarians, so mysterious, like it's so interesting. I want to become a Jew, I think that's the case for the Mithraics, and they would be like, oh, that's Zoroastrian stuff. It's like in the Game of Thrones with this cult of the fiery god. They would like this kind of spooky mages giving you this kind of prophecies, and that would always something new, like we don't have it in the Greek, in the Greece. But in Judaism, I think it would be just this status quo religion in the oikumenia, in this kind of Greek or Roman controlled bordering regions. So, but so many layers of this Christian. You can't just say anything with a 100% certainty, to be honest. It could be so many things.
Yeah, it's like if you are into true crime at all, about true crime, like there's this a murder, let's say, and you follow like who did the murder, like look at all the clues and see what's going on. Like there's this one that's in the news lately here in not here in the United States, in Indiana, there's the Delphi murders, right? And like everybody, like Reddit was speculating about what's going on. Like there's the victims got the murderer on Snapchat. They have a video of him. They have his voice, right?
Mm.
They have all these connections. They've arrested somebody that seems to be connected with it. And everybody's going down all these rabbit holes. Maybe the cousin is involved. Maybe the person whose land they were killed at is involved, and looking at all the different options, right?
Mhm.
Police just made an arrest the other week. Somebody nobody's ever heard of, right? Like just out of the blue, they make an arrest. This is the guy. And everybody's like, what is going, how did that happen? Like, what's going on,
Mhm.
right? That
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah, I see
if
what he's trying to say.
yeah, like if we actually peg like this is where Christianity came from, this is the origins of Islam, it could have been something. It's not even a something anybody's talking about, right? It's just like that crazy crackpot theory is the
Yeah.
closest thing we have to what actually happened, right? Like, but like even the crazy crackpot theory was off, right? Massively, right? And that's how things go down in real life, is just,
It's unpredictable.
yeah, everything was a red herring that we saw, right? And yeah, um
And back in the day, it would be like the main ideologies, to be honest. Like the guys in power, do you think they are just morons? They don't understand that through this ideology they control the local population. Like they would be very cautious about how to present ideologies, how to make it like more appealing to the public, and this guy would be titans back. That would be like the elite and the elite class who would write down the gospels. It wouldn't be just
mhm.
guys from the street. Like so, yeah. But overall, like let's let's get back to the surah Abu Lahab. We just started discussing Gnosticism, and you can just go away with this dialogue,
Mhm.
talk
Okay.
about it like for 4 hours. And the Tabat Yadi Abi Lahab, that's the first clause, and oftentimes the Wataba added. And in Arabic, it makes no sense because it's just a hanging verb at the end, like classical translation. Perished the hands of the Abu Lahab and perished, basically. There's no noun coming after to this verb. Like there's no connection, basically. And I think what happened, the qaris, who transmitted the Quran, they just made a mistake in how to compose the verse specifically. So this wataba belongs basically to the new clause. Wataba ma'agni anhu ma'luhu. And I was trying to find this agni because in Hebrew, ana means to sing, to respond, but overall in the Quranic context, this ghani or ghana means to enrich, to avail, and it's it's just different. It's just no connection. Like I don't know how can you jump from to sing and to respond into that specific meaning into Arabic. And I think what is happening, they just it came from the Parthian Ghaniz, and Ghanizi in Parthian means to it's denoted the treasury, like the treasury which would be located in the castles, like the chief treasury, basically. Uh, Maybe it's there, but I myself not so sure because, well, the phonetic of this word, I would say it's more Semitic. It sounds more like Semitic language rather than the Persian one. But it's a big mess, but I tried to reconstruct it with a Hebrew meaning, but just doesn't make any sense throughout the context of the Quran. It's not matching up. That when you just remove basically this meaning to avail to respond, and just break away the context throughout the Quran. So وَتَبَّ مَا أَغْنِيَ عَنْهُ مَالِهُ, meaning and perished what availed him, what enriched him, his wealth. And when I try to connect with the Manichaean stuff, because we need to recall the biography of Mani, how he was executed, and there's different hypotheses. And the chief one basically was about the idea that Mani, being as a sort of like the healer of the Shah, wasn't being able to heal his own daughter, and after that they would just executed him. It's very often, even in today's time, when the surgeons did a bad job and guy died after the surgery, and everything would be put in blame on the surgeon, and they would perceive this idea of the healing in the ancient time exactly like this. I think, oh, you was wrong in your method, basically, of healing the person, because back at the day there would be some sort of incantation going on. They would perceive world differently. The nature of the illnesses would be connected to these demonic deities. And after that he was executed. But there's another hypothesis which is based on the Biruni report, and Biruni was the famous Persian polymath, Muslim, supposedly Asheri Muslim, like the Orthodox one, but I very doubt so. And he was like the big scientist guy back at the day. He's like whole books about the geography, about the algebra and stuff. And he was very interested in Manichaeanism, which is very wow, out of the hand. In one of his books, he writes oh, I was searching for the Manichaean books, basically, the Book of the Giants, Book of the Mysteries, which is written by Mani himself. And unfortunately, Book of the Mysteries is not found, at least for now. But Book of the Giants was found in the Kelis and Egypt. And he just saying that he was seeking for these books, and the 40 years passed, and suddenly some guy appears, and this guy was associated with one of the Abbasid caliphs, and he actually said to him, look, I have this library of mine, and fortunately in this library this Manichaean books. And he started reading it, and after that he was disappointed, oh, I thought that would be much more a prominent reading. And overall, he presents the biography of Mani in his works, and in this biography actually says that one of the Parthian noblemen, just because he lived in Khwarezm, the Biruni, and even back at the day it would be ruled by Parthians, mostly. And this nobleman, who was somehow familiar with this Manichaean stories, he said to him that no, actually he was executed not because of this all healing failure, but because right after the Bahram, this Shah, who was responsible for the death of Mani, established himself as a ruler, he just kicked out the Mani. He just said, either you just go out of this land or I'm going to execute it. And after that, Mani started his preaching in India and in all these Buddhist regions, and accommodated some Buddhist beliefs into Manichaeanism. Basically, that's But he wanted to promote his teaching in Iran. In Iran, Shah returned, and Bahram just executed him because he was basically promised to be executed by the Shah, and he was so eager to bring this heresy into the realm of the Shah, and because of that, he ended up being executed by the authorities. And this execution was often associated with the chief priest of the Bahram, who was the Qardir, and this guy was like the mastermind of Zoroastrianism, I would say, with Orthodox Zoroastrianism back in the day. Because there's a whole lot of inscriptions of the Qardir we have, and this is where a rare phenomenon when some religious leader in Iran would have their own inscription, because inscription would show the authority of the Shah. Basically, it's only for the kings, this type of thing. And when we see this, the Iranian inscription there, where like stylistically organized, very recognizable, and in this inscription, he proposes, he boasts himself that because of him, the many heretics were banished from the realm of Iran. And there's a whole list of different sects which were presented back in the day, and like Nazareans, the Christians, which is interesting because they would differentiate between the Nazareans and the Christians, or Christians, which is more correct pronunciation. Maktak, nobody knows who this Maktak, Buddhists, Brahmins, which indicate they like this kind of Hindus, and the Zandiks, the Manichaeans, obviously. And the Zandik later on would become Zindik in the Arabic heresiology. Like it would denote this kind of enemy of Islam who portray himself as a Muslim. But early on, it would denote first and foremost Manichaean, and you would need to think why this secondary meaning applied to this first one, the earliest one. Why would suddenly Manichaeans would be associated with this crypto-Muslims? And most probably Mani was executed because of this proposal of this Qardir, and Qardir portrayed badly in Manichaean literature itself. Obviously, why? Because he was instigator of the murder of the prophet of Manichaeans. And what I try to say that this was more, I think, religious policy why the Mani was kicked out, because this Orthodox Zoroastrian orthodoxy back at the day, they were realizing that if Bahram would allow Manichaeans to be spreading out in their lands, that would mean that treasury, which was allocated to them, would be shared with the newcomers, with this new Manichaean priesthood, and that would decrease the income of the religious authorities, and the man fights for his money, basically. And and because of that, probably he was executed. And this idea that presented in Quranic text that perished his money, basically perished what he earned, it could reflect exactly that, like this. And Abu Lahab, as being the governor of the flames, could be the Qardir, the priest. And this is my proposal. It would make perfect sense, because in this verse, in the surah, not the verse, in the surah, in the chapter, not only Abu Lahab is doomed to the eternal flame, but also his imra'atahu, and imra'atahu, which comes from the Aramaic mar, and even Mani himself is often called Mar Mani. This through just denotes the Lord. Often translated this imra'atahu as the wife, which is very like very misleading. Imra'atahu basically means the female lord, the lordess, the mistress. And this poor wretched woman in the Sunni tradition identified with the wife of this Abu Lahab, this uncle of the Prophet, and she was like throwing the garbage when the Muhammad tried to pass on the road, and she was like bad woman, and because of that she would bear the hablun min masad, what is called this rope, twisted rope on her neck. Nobody knows why the rope, like, to be honest, it's not connected with the Sunni eschatology, but it makes perfect sense when you see it from the Zoroastrian perspective. And in Zoroastrianism, when this kind of divine twins passing through the bridge, they either pass this Chinvad bridge or they fall from it. And for the good person, this bridge is the wider. For the bad, is the thinner. It's like the razor blade. And this divine twin of yours is accompanied by what is called the Diana, which is the Houris in the Quran, by the way. That's like the origins of the Houris, this virgin maidens, who are those virginal spirits acting like psychopomps. And the bad person, if he had a bad deeds in his life, he would be basically snatched out of this bridge by the demons from this hell beneath the bridge. And very oftenly in Zoroastrian literature, it's portrayed that humans are born with a rope on their neck. And this rope is this rope of demons. And during this procession, when person pass through this bridge, for the good person, this rope perishes, but for the bad person, this rope remains, and that basically the cause of the fall from the bridge.
You know, it's interesting. I'm reminded of A Christmas Carol, right? We have Scrooge, right? Ebenezer Scrooge, and we have, who is his employee?
I don't remember.
But it's a similar idea where maybe this is borrowed from Zoroastrianism, where you have like chains on you, right? And the more misdeeds you do, and they're invisible while you're alive, the chains grow and grow and grow, right? And Jacob Marley, that's the name I was thinking of. Jacob Marley, has all these chains on him, and Ebenezer Scrooge asks him, "Why do you have all that?" Right? And he's like, "Because of the misdeeds I did in my life." Right? But if you could see yours right now, yours are massive compared to mine. Mine's nothing, right? And tells him to, like, repent.
Yeah, I think it's a good analogy. Yeah, it's even presented in the Eastern Orthodoxy picture with this Lestvica, with a stairway to the heaven, when this saints would climb down to the God, basically, but the demons would snatch the bad ones. And it's just very visual in the iconography. It's just straight away like that, a stairway to the God with the demons beneath. Where is Zoroastrian? What's interesting, well, I spoke about the Kardir and his inscriptions. And one of this inscription, Kardir mentioned this Merkava mysticism, his experience of this divine presence, basically this procession through this bridge. And obviously he says that if I'm the bad person, then my bad deeds will be my bad end. If I'm the good end. And of course he portrayed himself that he passed the bridge, obviously, and he's the good person. And in this narrative, this divine twins appear of this, because as far as I know, it's not solely the person who passes the bridge. It's he's like this kind of spiritual body who would be responsible to this. And this divine twins later on would be adopted in Manichaeism, as far as I know, this kind of divine twin tradition. And there they're described as a man and a woman in literally text, who are his double. It's just literary translation from the Persian, and by double it obviously means this kind of divine twins. And what I think Quran is trying to say that no, you haven't passed the bridge. Your woman, there's a rope on her neck, like you weren't like basically weren't good person in the real life, and you would be snatched into fire. And the woman, like imra'atahu, his woman, basically his lordess, is this divine counterpart of the Kirdir, which appears at the bridge. Maybe it's very schizophrenic one hypothesis, but I literally haven't found any explanation, any good explanation out of the Sunni tradition. If we just disregard basically the biography of Muhammad, what is meant? Like what's the story behind the surah? And I think that's the good explanation to what is happening, especially if we consider the Manichaean reports, when they just not blaspheme, but they were negative towards the Qartir, obviously. That would make perfect sense, that some Manichaean, literature would end up being in the corpus of the Quran. And that's why it's the Meccan surah. It's the earliest. It's questionable, but it's more poetic. And Manichaeans were very famous for the poems, and Mani himself was a poet and an artist. He's often depicting like writing, the paintings and stuff in the Persian miniatures. So I'm not familiar with the Syriac liturgies. Maybe there are some connections with them, but I couldn't find it. Like basically, there's the only explanation why the Abu Lahab would be used, the father of flames. This would be some honorary title for the priesthood. And as you know, there's like Arabic word salah, denoting the prayers, and there's the big Christian pun against the Muslims when they quote the verse "Inna Allaha wa malaikatu yusalluna ala nabi," that the God and the angels praise towards the Nabi, towards Muhammad, and even though it's not presented in the verse, but just assume it's Muhammad. And they say, "Oh, God prays towards the creature." And this salah, it comes from the same root as salah in the Hebrew, meaning to roast and to broil, and associated with a fire. And this salah in Hebrew doesn't denote the prayer, but it seems to me that this association begins with the Aramaic. So in Aramaic and in the Syriac, salah as in Arabic means to pray, both to pray and to broil, to throw something into fire. And I think that this secondary meaning appeared because of Zoroastrian influence, because the Zoroastrian prayer would be directed towards the sacred fire, towards fiery altar. They would pray towards this eternal flame of Mithra. And even like in Muslim prayer, there's the big discussion of what is called the Rafa Yadayn, like this kind of raised hands, because the Hanbalis would like say that it's paganry and stuff. And you can see how this kind of gesture would be very similar to what the Zoroastrian do like you just accumulating this heat from
Yeah.
the fire and then spread it
Oh,
on
really?
your face. Yeah, and I
That's
think that
that's what Hindus do during the
yeah,
artis.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that's at least that's the origin for part of the
Yeah.
Muslim prayer.
Yeah. Now, so there's that apologetic, right? That some people David Wood. He loves
Mhm.
that with that Allah is praying for Muhammad, right?
Mhm.
Well, who's he praying to when he's praying for Muhammad, right? That's the whole question. But it's saying that he's roasting for Muhammad, that it's some kind of
Well, Jesus prays for the sinners to the God the Father, so
yeah.
it's not
Well, I mean
complete.
that's explainable, right? Like because he's
But in
praying to the Father.
Islam, yeah,
Yeah,
but in Islam it's unexplainable. I agree. Because we just simply assume that Allah in the Quran is just personal name rather than just simple literal translation, the God. And when we assume the secondary meaning, the Quran becomes very interesting book, I would say. And different the gods appears.
so
Uh,
they're
but
talking. Oh, it does say the gods in plural in the Quran.
no, the gods would be ilahatan, but Allah, the God, like the singular thing, the God, the
Yeah,
al-ilah. So, and overall, I think that's whole ilah. It's very, there's this, I think, the same problem we experience with the Torah, where
yeah,
the certain names of the God were replaced with a Hashem in order to disguise this it's very unmonotheistic past, where there's different names appear of the Godhead. So maybe similar stuff happening in the Quran, like this author would take some older literature, which is not so, I mean, it's not even monotheism. Monotheism as term is just Protestant term from the 15th century. Like, come on. What we're talking about, the monotry or the henotheism, when we're talking about the scripture, like there is God who exists besides the chief God, and the chief God is the good one. Others demons, or just demons. That's the whole
mhm,
story. And something similar happening in the Quran. Like I would suggest, especially with this Yusaluna ala Nabi, like that's the good argument. By the way, I wouldn't dismiss that. I wouldn't say like, oh, it's just Christian. There's the bad arguments, especially when they just trying to connect it with a like with this Orthodox Syriac, and then I don't know why I would just pick up the Orthodoxy as the example. Like it's almost like Jesus is the property of the Orthodoxy. Like Jesus was everywhere. Jesus was in Manichaeanism. Jesus was in Marcionism. Like it was everywhere. I wouldn't doubt that even Zoroastrian Orthodoxy would use Jesus, but they would merge it like the Mani did into their own religion. Like, oh, it represents the
mhm,
beast. Okay, there's because in Manichaeanism, it's obviously
yeah,
there's this kind of fallen
yeah.
myth of the battle between the light and the darkness, and
Even in Islam, they have
uh,
Jesus. Although
yeah,
in Islam, he's more just to stamp, yep, Islam is true,
yeah.
right? Like, I mean, that's where
But
he
I think
appears.
all this misconception that Quran is talking about the anti-Trinitarianism, it's just, I think what's more obvious conclusion that Quran just borrows from Nestorianism, where the humanity of Jesus is very important, and
Mhm,
but even in the verse of the Quran where it's where it's speak that, oh, Jesus and Mary actually ate the fruits, like they weren't like docetic divine things in the sky. They were like human beings. They were eating the food. Uh, it just to stress the humanity. It
yeah,
wasn't solely because they were anti-Trinitarian. there was Syrian and anti-Trinitarians, don't get me wrong, but it was like small minority, I would say. Because Arianism, this kind of anti-Trinitarian movement, is more European thing. It's not the Middle Eastern thing. It's just because the Goths, the Visigoths, the Arian churches would be all across the Spain, the Germany, and until like the 7th century, by the way, when the Islam would rise. And and who would ransack the Rome in the 5th century? It would be Goths, Gothic Arian. That's why Constantine would be just like not bloating, but swimming between these two extremities of what is called the Orthodox Christianity and Arianism. And the Constantine died as an Arian. He wasn't died on the solely Christian faith. And that's the politics behind it, but I'm not so sure that there is anti-Trinitarian stuff in the Quran, because what it basically says that don't say that God is one out of three, and the Trinity is not like presented in a way it's presented in the contemporary Christian sources. So where weird stuff of the Mary worshipping, probably there were some sects who would venerate the Mary as the divine Sophia, and to be honest, it's everywhere in like Facebook groups where the females who are interested in the Gnosticism, they will be, oh, Mary's like this divine mother. You can see how it could easily be transformed in some pagan worship. In the eyes of like the iconoclastic, but even the Trinity itself, come on, it's not the problem, because Islam would be arose in the 4th century, not in the 6th, right after the Nicaea. But we never heard about this movement, and no traces of the Abrahamic Kaaba in the Hijaz. Like there's no reports about that. I think that's more or less the continuation of this weird mix of whole bunch of stuff. We're talking about the Quran. Definitely historians and just assume they were like very close kin to the orthodoxy, because they were using Peshitta. That's basically the argument. They were using this kind of four gospel homily. Nobody knows what's the original. Nobody knows where it comes from, because before the Peshitta were Diatessaron tradition. And we can only guess what was this Diatessaron. Like Mani himself quotes Diatessaron. There's the great work of the professor Zundermann about the quoting in the Turfan manuscripts, and because there's like clear parallels with the homily, with this Diatessaron homily tradition, which came later on in the Arabic versions, for example, because there's different versions of this Diatessaron. There's Syriac version, there's Arabic version, there's Latin version, and how it's quoted by Mani, it corresponds with how it's presented in Arabic, with a sequence, basically, because there's a Mark appears, then some verse from the Luke appears, and it's exactly like that, basically. So, and who knows, maybe there's something besides the fourth canonical gospel, just the name itself, Diatessaron, like through the four, it's Greek in origin. It just came from the Orthodoxy side. They just name it and say, oh, they were using four gospels in order to facilitate they already established dogma that only four gospels, other besides is a heresy. And we know about the traditions besides the four canonical ones: Gospel of Thomas, Gospel of Barnabas, Gospel, whatever you name it. Like, and even the names itself is questionable, because names first time appears during the time of Irenaeus somehow, and he first the one to quote the name of the gospel. It's like, it's a mess. It's just a mess. Yeah, and speaking about this, all about this Hecalot literature and this visionary experience and the Kardir vision, and it was everywhere in Gnosticism, to be honest, because I was just repeating this Gnostic Gospels. I remember about the Apocalypse of Paul, the small version where he basically, like the Kardir vision narrative in the Kardir inscription, describes this kind of visionary experience of Apostle Paul in the presence of this demiurge, I would say, because in the Apocalypse of Paul, he's called Old One. And this Old One is very often used in Manichaean sources, by the way. They would identify it, they would name it like that, or they would name him Adonai. This kind of like old looking dude with beard sitting on the throne with a white tiara. And Paul, like, just in doubts, like what to say to him, and he's like spirit, like talking, like speak to him, like don't be silent, this is just the mighty God. And he's asking about the keys, and this refers to this idea, Gnostic idea, that angels keeping this the bypass towards the higher realm with a specific word combination. And Paul will tell the word combination, and he says, and finally I reached the octaat, this pleroma, basically, of Valentinians and many other Gnostic schools. And what is interesting in this text, that during this discussion between the Paul and the demiurge, the witnesses appears, and these witnesses are coming out of the deeds of his body, like his hands will be witnessing his deeds, and it is a recurrent theme in the Quran, where like the skin will tell about what he did, like it's one of the verses. And I even think that there's a whole misconception about the four witnesses in the fiqh tradition, this kind of Islamic jurisprudence, where there must be four witnesses to testify the sin of the person. And I think it's just straight away from the Gnostic school. It's just misreading of the surah, which is presented, Surah Nur. It's almost talking about this same visionary experience, that that when person like will pass to this throne room, the four witnesses would be against him. And I think that somehow denotes this, and whatever tradition you pick, because in Apocalypse of Paul there's three witnesses, not four, and they associated, and I don't remember, but with the certain limbs of the human body. And I think same happening in the Quran. Like it's just you can't disenchant Quran from this visionary tradition, I would say, like what is called Hecalot literature. And this Hecalot literature itself, I think, just came straight away from the Zoroastrianism, from this kind of idea of this shamanic visual ritual representing metaphysics in this visionary anthropomorphic form, where you need to use like symbolic language to describe the divinity. I think that's what's happening.
Yeah.
That's just recent findings. I was just contemplating about this yesterday, and I was reading this Apocalypse of Paul, thinking, wait a minute, that's very similar. And there's actually the second Apocalypse of Paul, which is much longer version, Coptic version, and there's the whole like description of racket and hell, like they would like burn, boil, very similar to the Quran and to the Zoroastrian tradition itself, and to the Buddhism, where like there is very, very horrific depiction of hell presented.
Yeah. And, we had mentioned about, we're in Zoroastrianism, we're going across this bridge, and there's the individual has both a man and a woman,
Yeah, it's just
And
twin counterparts.
it reminds us of the bridal chamber in
Yeah,
Valentinianism.
exactly. I think there's strong connection. I
Yeah,
think even
go ahead.
in the Quran, when it's talk about the zawaj or azwaj, which is often translated as the wife, but the literal translation would be the pair, the twin of zawaj, because the God created zawjati in pairs in the Quran. And I think this tradition was something big in historianism. I would guess so. Like it was the standard for the Iranian Christianity. I would suggest this something like this. It's everywhere. It's Manichaeanism. It is attested in Gnostic literature, which would be circling around the Middle East. In Valentinianism, even though Valentinianism itself arose from the Egypt, but I think it's like very uncanny way to give hope for this Syncretite communities. Like, oh, you don't have women in this world, you will have such beautiful princesses in the next one. And that was abused later on by the by the Sunni Orthodoxy in unimaginable way. That not only there's not going to be only one mistresses, virginal lady, but 73 ones. But I think, yeah, what you said about the Valentines exactly, because I remember having same thought when I was reading the money epistles and this bridal chamber stuff. Yeah, it was basically the part of the, as far as the part of the pillars of faith, like you have the Eucharist, and in the contemporary Christianity it's like the main rituals, but the Valentinians, to addition to that, had this bridal chamber. So and it's mentioned in the Gospel of Thomas too. So
the infancy Gospel of Thomas.
No, the like this Legion of Jesus is more like
Oh,
saints.
okay. Yeah, I don't recall the bridal chamber. I might have missed it. Yeah, in Thomas, but yeah, a lot of those Logion or Logia is the plural. I don't know, but a lot of them are just like you read it and you're like, what the heck? Like some of them, like there must be something profound going on, but it's over my head. Some of them,
curse
yeah.
the man who eaten by the lion and became
Oh,
lion.
yeah.
It would be like, what the hell is going on?
Yeah, I read about that. The lion is like the evil demiurge, I think, or the world. And so if you're aware of it and you like overpower the lion, you overpower this world, the evil demiurge,
I
and
think
you
that's
see what's going on.
the most plausible, because there are other explanations which is very interesting, that the lion represents just represent this kind of karmic cycle of reincarnation, that if lion, but it doesn't make sense, it just doesn't add up grammatically.
Yeah, well, and when we look at depictions of the evil demiurge, he's a lion-headed serpent, right? So we can kind of associate the demiurge with the lion, but it's like you're consumed by the world, right? By this illusory experience. Well, it sucks to be you. But if you go ahead and you eat that lion, right? Then the world is yours, or I forget what they say, or you'll.
Oh, I don't recall. Like I read it like long
You're the
ago.
best. Yeah.
And and this kind of idea that lion is bad is purely Iranic one, because lion in Iran it's not a good animal. It's Ahrimanic animal.
Yeah.
It's the devil's one. You can even see it in the nature itself, when the lion would just eat alive the other animals, and they would be like screaming, scrambling one way, or being eating alive, and you can easily derive it, like why lion is a bad guy. But and in Mithraic tradition, there's this leontomorphic figures also appears, Zorvan, and Zorvan is just the demiurge of the Mithraism.
Yeah, and I'm looking for an answer as to these naked guys with the head of a lion everywhere and encircled with a serpent.
Yeah,
Um,
holding
that's
the
weird.
scepter.
Yes, yeah,
But I think it's connected with because there's one of the depiction in one of the Mithraeum where there's like this cosmic spheres pictured on the wall paintings, and
yeah,
this lion figure is basically sitting on the seventh heaven on this kind of a globe, and this
yeah,
globe have the cross on it. And I think cross just representing what is later on became the tetramorph in the Christian tradition, this kind of zodiacs, which would be at the like at the extremities of the zodiac circle. Maybe it's the origins of a Christian cross, who knows? And and the seventh, like the seventh chief deity ruling the seven spheres, often identified with the demiurge, because it's, and in Manichaean traditions also called the seventh one, besides this old guy. Very interesting, because recently I found, and I even posted in my YouTube like a community when you can post stuffs, that there's the one of the in one of the manuscripts there is presented this idea when they rebuke the ones who say that Jesus, but they do not use his name, they just use, like in the Quran, Barmani, which in Arabic would be bin Maryam, the son of the Mary is the son of the Adonai, the seventh one. Like, why would be he, meaning that Jesus would be his son, while his father crucified him, meaning this demiurge was responsible for the crucifixion. And maybe, just maybe, but I'm still investigating this stuff, the whole thing about the associators, or the mushrikeen, in the Quran is about exactly about that they would associate it's not like in contemporary Islam, where the mushrikeen is the one who would ascribe the sonhood of the Jesus towards the Allah Almighty, like Allah is too transcendental to have a son. It's like it's this kind of Ein Sof of the Kabbalah. It's like you can't describe him, but maybe it's not. It's a different relationship. Like it's the problem is not ascribing sonship to God. The problem ascribing sonship to the evil God, to the Old Testament God, and this Old Testament God, he cannot have a son. He cannot have a like true sonship, because he's evil. Like he's not representing the true father of Christ. Basically, he's not the father of Christ, and that's why I think there's a whole debate what's going on, because in the same, as far as I know, the same manuscript, the in order to portray this true God, Manichaeans would use the god of Marcion, this literally trop god of Marcion. And yeah, it's so sad we don't have anything like belonging to the Marcionite tradition. And I would suggest there was a whole lot of thing
yeah,
in Syriac, and there's a big misfortune about that. And and the sonship, like this anti-sonship, I think it could came up with this idea that no, do not ascribe the son to this demiurge, ascribe the sonship to the true God. Basically, it's not problem of sonship, and you can even argue that this Kul hu Allahu ahad, Allahu samad, which is often used as like this pun against the Trinity, and he is the God, the one. He is the self-sufficient, Kul hu Allahu ahad, Allahu samad. Lam yalit volam yulat. He is not begotten and he is not beget. He does not beget. And this idea he does not beget, it means that he does not beget in the sense that he's not responsible. He's not identical to this eternally Father. And he's not begotten because of the Gnostic myth, where the demiurge itself is abortion. Like there's some, like it's not begotten in the sense of the true emanation. Basically, it's because the whole cosmic drama in Valentinianism, it's about this kind of dissolution between this female and male androgynous counterpart of the Sophia. Like Sophia was dissoluted from the desired, what is called this female counterpart. And out of this, the Sophia started contemplating about the Heavenly Father. And throughout this contemplation, throughout this this error, this mistake of the Sophia, this demiurge is born as an abortion. Because why abortion? Because there were no male counterpart to which substituted in this inception. Basically, like he was incepted without the malehood. And I think that's definitely in like some sort of origin of this tradition of the virgin birth. Like they would just pick up that, and often Mary would be identified with a Sophia.
Yeah, I've thought the same thing, but under Mary, the Logos comes into the world.
Yeah.
Where under Sophia, the demiurge comes into the world. So it's kind of opposite, right? Maybe that's what they were getting at.
I would think that they were trying to volume down this dualism which were presented, and even Valentinianism itself, it would be Neoplatonic tradition. It would be much more in line with Plotinus himself. And Plotinus were famous for refutation of Gnostics, of the dualist Gnostics. And there's the whole bunch of arguments against like this idea that Demiurgos is the bad guy. I think something they tried to say that, well, like and as far as I know, even Ismaili tradition, one of the branches of the Ismailism called the Taibi Ismailis, that nowadays resides in India due to the persecution in Iran, they actually held like very similar belief that the demiurge is not the bad, like it just dumb, like it's a dumb guy, but he is on his way to the redemption. Like he realized his mistake basically when he said that I am the only God and no one besides me. And he realized that there's like higher God above, and he's trying to do all best for the trapped souls in his realm, for the humans, to receive this kind of godlyhood. Basically, he wouldn't be against the reunion of the souls with its higher God. Whilst in dualistic Gnosticism, he's a Satan. He's like if there is a guy who behind the fact that we are trapped here, that this guy, and you can't I think reconcile that in some way. And what Valentinus tried to do, and later on Daisonites or Bardaisonites, as often they called, they would be much in line with Valentinus himself, like this idea that no, Jesus is the good guy. Jesus, and by Jesus they would mean this demiurgic figure. And even in the iconography, Jesus is often depicted like sitting on the throne and stuff. Like he's the king of the throne. As in Quran is Rabbul Arsh, called the Lord of the throne. And of course, this is Allah somehow, and there's a whole debate It's the whole debate, like the whole enmity between the Ashari tradition and the Hanbali because of this. Because the Hanbalis, they just read it literally and say that, well, God, Rabbul Arsh, he's sitting on the throne. While Ashris, they would allegorize that. They say, oh, no, throne means the mightiness, like it's not the literal throne. And we just assume that Islam is like this kind of idea of this divine simplicity. It's already presented within the Quranic text. Maybe there's dualist stuff going on, and there's different Arabs, different lores in the Quran. But it's just so sad, to be honest. And even recently, I found out that reading Manichaean stuff, there's the Manichaean rendition of the Book of the Giants, because this Book of the Giants itself is a Mandaic in origin, and Mani would just took out this mundane book and rehashed it, so it would be like harmonized with his dualistic ideas. And in this book, actually, there's the similar idea that Iskandar, or the Alexander the Great, was would be like the responsible for this. During the end times, there would be the whole hordes of this demonic beasts unleashed because of him. And this Gog and Magog tradition, which later on would be presented in like this kind of Alexandrian literature and came into the Quran as the story of Dhul Qarnayn, the possessor of the two horns. I think maybe there is some connection, because it's very interesting that in Parthian, Alexander called Iskandar, exactly like that would be sound in Arabic later on, Iskandar. So I'm just guessing, but so many stopped on. I'm just so mad because, like, it's like nobody even discusses that. Like, just, what are you on about? There's the Gnostic quotes in the Quran, like. Yeah, but and this whole idea of this modern Christian apologetic, when they try, like, they best to connect it with the Christian orthodoxy, while there is like this big elephant of Gnosticism in the room, it just drives me mad, because I think what they're trying to do is like, oh, let's not look about this guy, because when you start to mentioning these guys, this is not only problem for Islam. This is the problem for Christianity itself and the origins of Christianity, because people will start to discussing Gnosticism, starting like reading about the stuff that the Christian tradition wasn't so honest, representing their enemies, and yeah, so many. Forget it.
Yeah. Where, you see a bit of that with Christian apologetics against Islam, that I think it's so close to getting it, right? Like, I was listening to David Wood, and he was talking about there's this part of Isaiah where it says, I'm probably going to mess it up, but somebody will be given a scroll and it'll be demanded of them, read, but he'll say, I cannot read.
Oh, yeah.
And this is in Isaiah, right?
Yeah,
and Muslims will look at that and say, this is a prophecy of Muhammad in the Hira cave, right?
in Surah 96, right? Iqra bismi rabbik, like, read in the name of your Lord.
Yeah. And they say also, like, in the Greek for Isaiah, there's a misreading of some word where it sounds a lot like Hira. And that's why it's in that cave, right?
First time I heard it, to be honest. But
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I mean, it's recent for me. And you look at this and say, this is where the Hira cave with Gabriel, this is where it comes from. It comes from a reading of Isaiah. But then they also say in here that no, or at least David Wood says, it can't be because this is actually um, the people who just won't get it because they say, oh, read, I can't read. And this is actually wayward people, not an individual person, not a righteous person, but people that just say, I'm refusing to get it and to understand, right? But and I would agree that that's what Isaiah is talking about, right, from context. But it's hard to get away from that. Read this scroll. I can't read, right? And it kind of gives the game away. They don't want to admit that this is probably where it comes from, but
yeah, but
it gives away
no.
that
As far as
religion. That's just how religion is made. Is like you look at previous texts, you
Mhm.
syncretize it with your own, and they don't want to look at it that way, right? Because it kind of
Yeah,
shows a little bit with their own side. Yeah.
but I think that's what I wanted to say. As far as I know, there's no like the Orthodox theologian, Sunni theologian, like living back at the day who would propose this idea. Like it's new. So
Mhm.
in that sense, but I myself, when trying to reconstruct this Iqra Bismi Rabbik, I would look up into the Isaiah verse. So it's very similar.
Yeah.
It's like read, proclaim in the name
Yeah.
of your Lord. That I can't.
Yeah. Absolutely. And along the same lines, I was looking at Apollonius of Tyana, Apollonius of Tyana, right? If you're familiar, he's kind of like Christ-like figure, kind of like Muhammad, right? He's kind of like a physician,
Oh,
does miracles, but he does it in like
oh,
a
I
strange
recall
way.
seen
Yeah.
some interview with some professor who tried to connect the dots between the Christ and like he was like some sort of Roman healing god, basically, is something like that.
Yeah,
Like,
except he's human, but he's like
yeah,
he has like these weird cures for disease. Like I'm just making this up, but it's something like, okay, this man is almost dead. He's in bed and he's like, all right, what we need to do, just come up with weird cures. Break an egg on his forehead, and we're going to put feathers in his ears, and we're going to shake his feet, right? Just weird
mm-hmm.
stuff like that. And then he recovers. And this guy knew exactly what to do at the time, right? And so this guy is kind of like a Thoth
Yeah,
figure. He's like,
Egyptian.
yeah, he's like Hermes Trismegistus, right? And which is I see the connections between Gabriel as like the mouthpiece of God.
Mm.
I mean, both in Christianity and Islam, Judaism. But the thing is, with Apollonius of Tyana, he goes into a cave, right, to discover um, these tablets, right? And he's in there for a long time. Eventually, he comes out of the cave and with the tablets or this ancient wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
And you wonder if that's not a model for the Hira cave within Islam, right?
Mm-hmm.
Goes into a cave. He's there for a long time, and he comes out with the tablet.
But even
Maybe, but
the tomb of Christ, as far as I know, it's like in original Greek, it's called like a cave. It's not the tomb. So
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
and well, and there's a lot of caves. I mean, caves were a big thing back in the day, which kind of speaks against my idea a little bit
mm,
because I mean, anybody who's anybody walks away from the divine with, well, Moses did it with tablets. Apollonius of Tyana went into a cave and got the tablets, but yeah,
yeah,
like in the Nag Hammadi infancy narratives, Christ is born in a cave, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of stuff is happening in caves, right? Lazarus.
Yeah. Caves were important for this Encrotite ascetic communities. Yeah, when you mentioned the Gabriel as the spokesman of God, I think what is happening with all this El at the end, it's not like just there's something of God. They literally gods. You need to translate it literally. Like Michael would be the god, the king, or what else? Azazel would be the god, the mighty one. It's just later theology involved, like when they try to say, oh no, it's the of the god, like they're just representing the divinity. And I think
Interesting.
what is happening in the Quran is just the same. It's just this different spelling, maybe, where it's called the Allahul Aziz, Allahul Hakim. It's this ilah. It's just represented in the first sentence, not like the suffix in the Hebrew at the end, like el at the end. Even though they would try to stress the godhood, because they would use it with a definite article. Allah, not just Ilahul Aziz, but Allahul Aziz. But it's overall idea of this, why they would use El at the end and not the Yah, for example. Like why? If the Yahweh is the highest God. That's the question. So what I just researching Quran, like I was come up with some interesting ideas. Like I wouldn't dare to think like that if I was in hold of the Sunni orthodoxy, even though most of the people would call me a kafir. I don't give a damn. Like there's so much open opportunities. Like the whole idea of this kind of distinctive narrative between Old Testament God and the New Testament God, I think it's embedded in the Torah itself. I wouldn't suggest that Marcion was some dumb dude who haven't realized that there's a whole bunch of problem if we would propose this thing. And so many distinctive, like this kind of dualistic stuff, like 2 trees in the garden, 2 mountains where Moses received the supposed laws, 2 laws which is presented in the Torah text, the 2 messiahs, 2 Adams, 2 seeds. Like why 2? Like why not 3? Why this dualism everywhere, basically embedded in the text? And 2 messiah tradition. When the heresiologist would quote the Marcion, he would say that there's the 2 Christ, basically Christ of the good God and Christ of the bad God. And Christ, it's not denoting the name. Christ basically is just translation of the Messiah. It's Marcion would use Christians instead of Christians, but Christians would be like, I don't remember, the lovely ones or something like that. But Christ is
well spoken, I think, right?
Like
eloquent.
Eloquent. I don't know. I don't remember, unfortunately, but it's just different semantics behind these 2 words. And Christ means it's like Masih in the Arabic, basically. And and these 2 Messiah traditions are presented in Talmud, like everywhere, like this 2 Messiah ben David, Messiah ben Joseph. And it's kind of Messiah who is pierced, who is like the pierced Messiah, the Messiah under not the guilt, but suffering Messiah, how they often called it. And this Davidic Messiah would be wrathful, like killing everybody, every Goyim will be like slaughtered and something like that. I don't think that Marcion came up with it out of his ass. It was probably some theology behind it. And
well, I mean, that's how it works. There's nobody really ever comes up with a religious idea entirely on their own. It's always based off of something before, and it's often putting different ideas together, right? And I mean, you'd think of it like, geez, there's this guy, he's flooding the world, right? Like with Dr. Litwa's the evil creator.
Yeah.
That the Egyptians, they say, well, there's only one God that does all these plagues and everything, right? That's their God, right? It's Typhon Set,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of like the closest thing to their devil, right?
Yeah.
And it's not a big stretch to think this guy is killing the kids, of the Egyptians. He's
It's
like,
like it's like in Samuel, don't spare anyone, like man and woman, children and sucklings, meaning children and infants, cattle and asses. Like, come on, come on.
yeah. And it doesn't take, and even with Exodus, the Pharaoh is about to repent, right?
Mhm.
But then the Old Testament, God hardens his heart again so he can suffer more,
Yeah.
right? And it's a little like, it's not that big of a stretch to think that this guy isn't a very good guy. But then it's my cats are having an argument. This is jeez, I might have to take a break for a second. This is controversial stuff we're talking about. I didn't mean to offend, any cats in the audience that are
So
listening to this.
Old Testament God battling the new one.
But and
It's
then what are we thinking? Like, and then we come up with the idea that, okay, the God has to kill his son
Mhm.
because of the sins. It's a little bit, I don't know, like, what would Marcion's take be? Is that, well, this God isn't that good? And then he doesn't propose that there's a God above it, or does he? Not as far as I'm aware. He's just saying this God isn't very good.
Yeah, but this whole Redeemer myth is, as far as I know, is presented in Marcionism itself, that the Jesus came to redeem us from this filthy earth built by the demiurge. Like, it's almost like that, to redeem the souls which is trapped by this lower creator deity, and this kind of idea of the sins, as far as I know, came from the Saint Augustine,
Yeah.
and this almost I would call it like perverse idea, perverse development of the Manichaean idea, because Manichaeans would be very like this kind of anti-naturalistic guys, almost emo, like everything is bad, everything's doomed, like everything is wrecked by the demons. There's gonna be eternal hellfire, and I think eternality of hellfire came straight away from the Manichaeanism. And in Manichaeanism, it makes perfect sense why the hell is eternal, because, well, the devil deity, which is Ahriman in the Manichaeanism, is omnipotent one. He held the power, and his power is so strong that he's able to, even after this final battle will occur, he will be able to trap some light, and this trapped light would be represented by the sinners, and the sinners would be doomed. They would be eternally tormented by these demons. And it makes sense when you realize this Manichaean cosmology. Oh, that makes sense why the hell is eternal. Doesn't make sense the eternal hell within the orthodoxy position. Just straight away declared, but it doesn't derive from the cosmology itself. And the scenery, it's just, if there's arch heretic for Islam, it's not the Paul, it's the Augustine. Like, it's 100%. And and he was arch heretic for Nestorians too. Like, so no big right, and for the Manichaeans, obviously.
Yeah.
Why? Because he betrayed the Church of the Mani, so on. But he had some point, especially critiquing this Manichaean, I would say, this ontology where there's kind of different stuff, that sun and moon is the vessels for the souls. He would he would be highly critical towards this idea that like kind of nonsense. This is just lunary, just the planetary spheres, like it doesn't correspond with the transformation of the souls. And nowadays it's very hard to defend this idea after heliocentric system. Yeah, people just came up with a already existing. They would just use the scripture, for God's sake. They would just. And for Marcion, it's obvious, and for Paul, that they used the Old Testament. Paul quotes the Old Testament. I think what's happening with Marcion exactly the same thing. And the heresiologists report that Marcion would quote and would be like, why would he quote this? Like, oh, the Old Testament deity, why would he quote this? He's just against him.
Mm-hmm.
Well, because maybe he had some system, some theology behind it, which he could back up, like the Paul did. And Marcion itself would be from Synap, right? And Synap was very well famous for Jewish community inside it. And the overall, this, I would say the Eastern Anatolia, which is Eastern Turkey today, and the Northern Syria, and there would be Jewish communities all around this, all around there. And Adiabeni, Atropateni, which is currently Azerbaijan, the Osroyeni, this Greek names for the, Roman names for these provinces. Jews everywhere. I myself later, like discovering this is would be just witnessing that Gnosticism, this dualistic stuff, just came out straight away from the Judaism, and it's not far-fetched to believe this thing when you closely examine the text of the Torah. I would guess so, and but before that, before studying Gnosticism, I was more inclined to the idea that Jesus have nothing to do with Judaism. It was completely different realm, but yeah. Well,
yeah, and you wonder if this is just crazy speculation that, maybe if we visualize the Kabbalistic tree, and the lower Sephirot are
Klipot.
Like that's like the god, of Exodus, right?
Yeah.
And then as you get higher, you see God in terms more of the monad,
right?
And it's just revealing like we're doing a scan of God starting at the bottom, and then we go up, and maybe
even,
that was
even the Sphirot tree itself would be opposed to the Klipot tree. Like they would be just opposite to each other. There was like this higher tree and the lower, and the lower responsible for the evilness of this world. So maybe it's how Kabbalah appeared to be, because if you just see what this kind of preachers for the public say, like Tavaya Singer, it's the completely different Judaism from the Kabbalah. It's like he's like in his own castles, like flying around. Like it's different Judaism basically. But when you examine the Kabbalistic teaching, who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe these rabbis are not well spoken like the Tavaya Singer, but
yeah. I love his energy that he brings to it, because he's just like you come up with these zingers, and you know your stuff, and you can call people out, and I've listened to him when he was talking about Kabbalah, and he says you have to really be proficient in the basics before you go to Kabbalah.
Oh,
He
okay.
says a lot of people have lost their faith by just going straight to Kabbalah, and that it's always like the straightforward reading of the text is always true, right?
Like,
But then there's other layers under it,
yeah, like
right?
the famous heretic Elisha ben Abuya, right, who is called the Acher in the Talmudic tradition. It's basically a Gnostic who had this vision of this divine presence, and so, oh, there's the two gods in heaven. What the heck? And after that, abandoned the mitzvot, the law of the Mosaic law, basically. And after that, he's called Acher, the other one. Like, he's like not
Yeah.
us. It's not from us. Yeah, and come on, this idea like you need to be 40 years old in order to study the Kabbalah. Maybe that was the beef for between the Jews and Jesus, because he obviously wasn't 40 years old. He supposedly died at the age of 32, and it's way younger than 40. But he's definitely were spilling the beans about the some stuff inside of this kind of secret Jewish traditions.
Yeah, very true. He's often described as like 33, but then there's no real source that says that. That's just by tradition.
Yeah, that's why there's a swoon theory and stuff like that he survived the crucifixion.
Yeah. So here, do we want to hit up some comments real quick? So if anybody's watching this that has a question or a comment, we can get to that.
If there's anyone.
Yeah, yes, indeed. So here's our first. Peter Rabbit. Love the variety of perspectives, philosophies, and beliefs of this channel. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Of course, I have to do, a flattering comment for my first one. It helps feed my ego, so thank you, Peter Rabbit. And Mithra is etymologically cognate with bud,
Maitre.
Yeah, meaning friendly. Is it loving the
but many suggested that idea that the Buddha Maitreya of the tantric, like of the Mahayana Buddhism, just came out straight of the Zoroastrianism, Mithra. And there's good evidence, because during this early development of Greco-Buddhist empire, there's a whole bunch of statues of Buddha, and he's sitting on the platform, and there's the carvings on the platform. It's basically Zoroastrian temple, or Zoroastrian fiery altar, and the attendants, just like in the early Muslim coinage, for example. And it's definitely there was some connection with Zoroastrianism. But the Muhammad being Mahamateh, that's I were skeptical. I had the idea of this Mahmedif in my one of the videos, where there's the Mahmedif is some sort of a inversed fallen demon. He's like reason demon. He helped he was a demon who helped the good guys, who helped the Armist in the Zurvanite tradition. And this Mahmedif is very similar to what is Mahadeva in the Hinduism. It's just the one M sound added. And Mahadeva was obviously associated with the Shiva in the Hinduism. So I could see that coming on as Mahadeva, Mahmedif, Muhammad. But overall, you need to prove how this phonetically.
Yeah, how could possibly be? Yeah.
I don't. Yeah. I see it as more like Jewish stuff. This Muhammad, because Muhammadim is in Bible. Is used, so it's more like Arabic stuff. I don't see it like as a foreign. But Mithra, Mithra itself, yeah, Buddha Maitreya, friendly, loving. Mithra from this Persian, it just solely translated as the pact, as the covenant, and as a friendship also. So this friendly, loving could be a correct translation. So, but Metatron, I don't know. I'm skeptical, but maybe.
Yeah, it would be interesting tying everything all together. I know, like with Metatron, a lot of people will link certain passages of the Quran with Merkaba mysticism,
Yeah, even
which
the Matthew himself, the name Matthew is just Matatyahu, the Metatron of the Yahweh. So it's this idea wasn't like fringe back at the day. I would say it's like classical.
yeah, absolutely. All right, here's another one from Dan Hopkins. Early church fathers say Mani died after trying to fly off a roof, which that's
Yeah,
interesting because that's how Simon Magus died. He
yeah.
flew off, and I think it's a bit like
But he's
what's
not
the
from roof. He's like was a sorcerer, and he
yeah
flied out with his sorcery, but then God intervened and he just fall
yeah
down. He just
which it's
abolished
like who's the god in Greek mythology who flies so close to the sun that his wings
all
melt and he crashes down?
the. Oh my God, I can't recall it. I can't remember.
There's it shares that's the source for
Yeah,
some word meaning somebody
yeah.
who's full of themselves. Um,
Not the Hermesos, but I don't remember. Like
yeah, somebody
the
who's
guy
like
he
yeah,
had this kind of the boots with the wings, like or something like.
yeah,
I don't remember. I just come
yeah. Although it's interesting that when people are so full of themselves, they fly, and that's what kills them, right? Um, so let's see. So he flies off the roof, and during the ceremony of the fig, church fathers
to test.
detested.
They
They say
say
Mani got his books from Buddha or Tirabinthus.
Interesting.
Ceremony of the fig, I'm not familiar.
I'm not familiar too.
Um,
It's like they changed. They detested, meaning they proposed one explanation and then suddenly different one. They Mani got his book from Buddha. Yeah, and Mani himself was portrayed so badly in Abbasid tradition. Like it just, thank God this demon died. And you would be wondering why this kind of Muslim heresiologies are so evil intended towards the guy who just died like 700 years before. Definitely some Manichaeans were still present. They would just need to rebuke them, right? And
mhm.
they often associate Zanadika with Ismailis, by the way, which is quite fine. Zanadika and Manichaeans. So, and a strong indication, for example, in the books of some Ismaili books like Rasail Ikhwan Safa, the messages of the Brethren of Purity. There is some dualist stuff going on in Alevi tradition. I found recently in this kind of Shia Discord, and they just pulled up the book called the Haftul Sharif. So many, like, it's this book, like, recently I found a channel called Let's Cult Religion, and he just posted the video, recent one, Shamsul Ma'arif, the most dangerous book in the like Muslim history. If there is dangerous book, that this book, Shaftul Harif, because this book is this dialogue between between one of the imams of the Shia tradition, Jafar as-Sadiq, who is the sixth imam of the both Ismaili and the Twelver tradition, which is like in what war now in Iran, and with the Mufaddal. And the Mufaddal was famous, this kind of Ghulati Shia, very like sectarian Shia who would ascribe divinity to Ali and stuff. And there's this kind of a dialogue between him and this Mufaddal. And very oftenly, Jafar al-Sadiq would quote the Quranical verses, but it's not there. It's not present in the current versions.
Interesting.
And also, there's of course this presence of the Tanasukh, and the arguments he made. It's like the same arguments I witnessed like 8 months ago when I studied it, tried to found this Tanasukh. It's just the same, whether he just differentiate between this Yawmul Qiyamah, Yawmuddin, between this lesser punishment, which is in the Quran, and bigger punishment, like Adhabul Azim. And lesser punishment, he meant by that the transmigration of the soul, and the Azim, it's when this judgment day will appear, this Zoroastrian Frasho Kireti, when this light will be separated from the darkness. So there's so many stuff. It's not, unfortunately, unpublished. That's the problem. And as far as I know, this Rasail is still during the translatory process right now. So it would be published soon in English. So
interesting. Yeah, with Alawi,
yeah,
right? Transmigration of the souls, divinity of Ali.
yeah.
And,
But I don't think they would just ascribe it to the literal man, because Ali just means the higher one, like Ali. And Ali is often used as the title of the god, so Aliyun. So maybe there was some pun. I don't know about the dualism, because I'm very new towards this kind of Nusayri traditions. I've just found it recently that they have their own books. I thought that this is just straight away oral, like the Yazidis. They just most about the oral stuff, but they have their own books. And I was like, what the hell? Started investigating this book, and it's just different Islam. And many often we hear that Alawi is just they're not Muslims. It's just different religion. Get the hell out of here. It's just like the Protestants who would say, oh, that's Catholics. They're not Christians. They're quoting the Quran. They were not quoting some Zoroastrian literature. So, yeah, it's sad. Sad state of affairs.
You know, I was just reading, I think it was in John, where Jesus says, I'm the gate, and just repeating that, right? And you wonder if that might not have played a part in Alawi tradition, where they have the gate, the veil, and the...
Yeah, gate, veil, and this higher Bab, hijab, and Ali, basically, is higher divinity. Who is behind the veil. And there's different Bab, there's different stuff going on, because this Alawi is not monolithic. There's different branches of this Alawis, depending on how they perceive this Babs, the Imams. And some would say that Saint Paul was a Bab. Some would say that no, Simon Peter was the Bab. So there's different different understanding, I would say, of reception of the prophet of the past. And it goes in line with the Mandaic tradition, where this prophets would be.
Always with the triad. But the idea that Jesus is the gate is interesting, because that's part of Christian scripture. And maybe that's where they got the idea that there's this thing that if there's a gate, there has to be something else, because
stressing stuff.
And then we have the idea of quoting surahs that aren't in the Quran. Is a different idea.
That was the big revelation for me.
And
there's the whole tradition, Shia tradition, like it's embedded in Shiism, I would say, this idea that Quran was changed. Tahriful Quran. Whole lot of, I would say, biggest Shia authorities, even for 12ers, they would write the books about this stuff. And nowadays, this 12ers would say, oh, no, they meant something differently. There was this guy, I don't recall the name, but some like guy from the Discord, he shared this name of this Shia authority who exactly wrote the book about the Tahrif, and the title of the book was like the defense of the of the Tahrif al Quran, of the changing of the changes in the Quranic text. And I was like searching about this and came up with this Shia forum on internet, and obviously some Sunni came and started, look, like you Shias, you're Zindiks, you're believing in this. Look, your Imam saying this stuff. And the guy would respond, oh, actually the book was much bigger one, and original version contained the refutation of this argument. But later on it was like it was redacted by someone. And I would be, wow, that's stuff. Because nowadays it's just politics of Iran. I think they try to make this ecumenical bridge between the Sunnis and Shiis, and obviously when you held this belief that the Quran was changed, it's just irreconcilable with the Sunnis. You're straight away kafir, like out of the window. And even the Imam Majlisi, he was like, I don't know how you can deny that it wasn't Shia tradition. And for Alawis especially, because they would stress it, they would say, no. The first three caliphs, they changed it up. It was the Quran of Ali. And recently there was discussion in Russian like social media between one of like this Dagestani Ashari, who would represent this Ashari side, and Azerbaijani Shi, who would represent the Twelvers. And even he would admit that there's the conception is different in Shiism, at least for the Twelvers, for this mainstream position. I guess they say that it wasn't compiled as it was supposed to be compiled, like basically. And the concorders of the surahs, so some surahs came up later on, the earliest surahs. It wasn't deemed to be like that, because they think that the first surah must be Surah Al-Alaq, Bismi Iqra Rabbik, not the Surah Al-Fatiha, for example. And that there's no tafsir, there's no explanation of the surah within the Quran, and that what Ali was ordered to the scribes, that they must write the tafsir, the explanation of the surahs within the Quranical text. They would say that, I mean the current orthodoxy of Iran, but they would never try to say that there was like the different verses in the Quran, there was a changes, there was like completely different readings. They would try to like back this up like somehow, because it go against this policy of ecumenism, which is now presented everywhere. So
yeah. And let's see. Here's One Love. Thank you so much for your comment. Sounds like Plotinus and Proclus. I'm not familiar.
I'm not familiar with Proclus. It was like an opponent, I guess.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Here we have One Love again. All Gnostics in Hellenistic world were mainly Jewish, I think. I'm not an expert. Although I thought Gnosticism, like there's proto-Gnosticism within Judaism. Although I thought it was, as far as we know, solely Christian. Is my understanding. But I guess it depends on what you mean by Gnostic, I suppose.
Yeah, it's just umbrella term. It's just basically Catholic propaganda.
Oh, here here's our answer from Martin.
Yeah, Icarus. Right.
Icarus.
Or Icarus, right? I don't know.
Icarus. Oh, and here, you know what? Again with Dan with Icarus. That's who we were looking for. That's the guy who flies up and his wings melt and he smashes to the ground. We could have had
Prototype.
like a contest or something, like, you know, a radio contest, who can come up with it. So if we did, it would have been Martin and Dan.
Yeah, it's a prototype for the Simon Magus tradition. Interesting. Never thought about that.
And then, according to Dr. Litwell, the Mandeans cannot be traced back to the 1st century, which is very good. He was watching the last interview I did with Dr. Litwell, and yeah, and I've actually done an interview with a Mandean, and they say, you know, clearly it goes way back, but I don't know, like, I mean, yes.
And to what century he dates that? Because I still haven't watched your video with the Litwell.
Oh yeah, 1st century. It's not that ancient, or at least the evidence of it doesn't go back that far. Though, you know, when I look at Mandeanism, there's such commonalities between Christianity and Mandeanism. Like, you can see the origin of the cross with the they hate if you call their symbol the cross, because it's not for killing people on, it's for peace and, you know, spirituality. So the plus symbol that they have with the shawl on it, you can see how that became a cross, right? And the idea, I don't remember who came up with this, but Christ as a Mandean preacher, the Romans decide to crucify him as like a mockery on the symbol of his faith.
Symbol. Oh, interesting.
So, I mean, that's the idea. I mean, it's an interesting idea. I don't know if I hold to it, but you can look at all the parallels, right, with baptism, with bringing peace to the world, with water symbolism, and make a case, at least superficially, for Mandean origins for Christianity.
Dr. Litwell is just straight away guy. If there's no manuscripts, then you're failed. It's just
yeah, you know,
I think that because Mandeism was probably oral back at the day, like Yazidism,
just like everybody was, you know. Yeah. But, you know, that's why we have to have Dr. Litwell, because he's grounded, right? Where I can think of, you know, other people and even myself, you know, we're speculating and we're just like, we cease all contact with the ground and we start to float away and fly away. And the danger of that, it hasn't happened to me yet, but, you know, you could, you know, suddenly find yourself no longer able to fly and you smash on the ground. But Dr. Litwell, you know, he's based solidly on the ground, you know, and very, I guess, grounded would be the word. And he's so grounded, he shuffles when he walks. There's no levitation involved. Yeah, very solid scholar. And okay, here's bonus points for Martin.
Daedalus.
His father was Daedalus.
The father of Icarus. Interesting.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So, let's see. I don't know if I touched on this, but we're talking about surahs that aren't in the Quran, right? And you've probably heard of Al-Aqsa, right? Where they have the verses all around the cathedral or the rotunda.
Oh, yeah. But I think they are like exactly like in the Quran, as far as I know.
There's one where they say it doesn't appear anywhere.
Yeah.
In the Quran.
I need to investigate that. First time I heard it. What the hell?
Yeah.
I always preconceive that there's like quoting, because I was seeing that in this. I remember even going to Quran or to watch it, but maybe there's some part of it which is not present. But yeah, and what the apologist answer to that?
There isn't one, as far as I know.
Uh,
Like,
the famous
yeah,
incident with the Ayatul Shaitaniya, the
yeah,
satanic verses too. I don't think it's, yeah, I think it's mostly made up. This whole report of the
yeah.
Ayatul Shaitaniya. And
Sadly, I think most of the reports are weak. I
most
mean,
of
it'd be
them,
neat. Some of them are very interesting, but they just sound made up. Like
yeah, they made
one,
up with the idea of mutawatir at one point of the history, that there's like corroboration, but what kind of corroboration you're talking with? Just corroboration of the Sunni theologians. Of course, they would be rehashing everything towards the Sunni tradition. Corroboration means when you have sources outside of your tradition, like Chinese sources, like Chinese chronicles, Syria chronicles. That would be historical corroboration, and not this madness. And this is the top of the, like, it's just the star on this evergreen tree. Like it's just the best which they came up with. And we are not talking the worst stuff. This kind of handbook. Let's not begin with the hadith, which is just
yeah,
ridiculous.
yeah. And speaking of the Hadith, there's that report with some of the abrogated
Yeah.
verses. The one where they talk about if the son of Adam had a valley of riches, he would
Mhm.
go off searching for a second,
Yeah.
and his belly would be filled with sand.
Yeah. There's a lot of
Where,
Christians, like Adam was created in the image of God. There's this hadith like that. So
yeah,
definitely.
where a lot of these, like, the people say, there's this YouTube channel, Islam Critiqued,
Mm.
which is a little bit, well, it's a lot of bit apologetic. So I guess take it with a grain of salt. It's like, okay, Islam isn't where it's at. It's actually Christianity, and you should convert to Christianity now. Although there's a lot convincing to it that a lot of the Quran finds its origin in the Talmud and
Mhm.
Talmudic stories. And that one abrogated surah sounds very Talmudic, right?
Mhm.
Like they love to refer to humans as the son of Adam. Belly filled with dust
Yes.
sounds a lot like in Genesis, right? Where the
Yeah.
serpent eats the dust. And the dual nature, two valleys filled with riches. There's a lot of valleys in the Talmud, valleys and mountains. Where a
But
lot of times,
you
yeah, go
can
ahead.
argue that Quran itself is like embedded within the Jewish tradition, like that. But yeah, we just assume Judaism is some sort of like standalone version religion. Like there's no influences of Zoroastrianism. There's no influence of other religions. It's straight away wrong. And I think what the Quran presents is like the Judaism, the strong flavor of Zoroastrianism, I would say. It's like super Zoroastrianized Judaism. So yeah, and regarding the Hadith, like came up recently with this Discord group. They just shared this article about the Saint Paul in the early Islam, and there's a whole lot of tradition about Saint Paul, and he viewed not as the arch heretic, and it's much have to do with the Mu'tazila and famous like Mu'tazila theologian Qadi Abdul Jabbar, who was like a big chief during like 11th century, and he came up with the idea that Paul was a like heretic bastard. He
Yeah,
just, and out of him
yeah,
like came up this apologia against the Paul later on in the Ottoman time, and even in today contemporary, like this dawa of the Salafis. And there's one interesting hadith they came up with in Musnad of Ahmad ibn Hanbal, where there's the presented idea of Manichaeanism, where there is this idea that the sinners, after the day of judgment, will be sent in eternal prison called bolos. And they are in this article, they just try to connect it with bolos, meaning the bulus, and bulus is the Arabic for the pole. But in fact, bolos is attested in Manichaean tradition. Bolos is the name for this eternal prison about which Mani has spoken. Bolos is from the Greek bolos, meaning this kind of lump of earth, and it's kind of like in Manichaeanism, this earth would be crumbled into this abyss, and because earth would be associated with the evilness. So yes, hadith, come on, like it's like taking some heresiological reports of Christian like saints as some sort of authority. It's very oftenly we see this as Irenaeus said to be, he just completely correct about representing the Gnostics. What on earth are you on? Like, thank God we have David Leto who exposes this stuff, where he just misquotes the Gnostic, misrepresent many Gnostic schools. So it just apology. It's sad.
Yeah, you just can't say how it is. You have to say how, put your spin on it, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, exactly. All right, let's see. Oh, let's see. We have Here, I'll just put this up just for fun. Jesus never existed. We have to show all opinions here. I think, I'm a historicist, although I don't think mythicism is as, far out there as people tend to think,
Yeah.
But I
wouldn't call them like chief mythicists or some lunatics like Dr. Price. Come on, the guy knows his stuff.
He knows his stuff. And he makes a good case for it, but he's not super committed. Like, I'm almost reluctant to call him a mythicist. He just kind of comes down where it's hard to say, right? Like, you peel back the onion and you keep on peeling, and you peeled back the whole onion at some point. There's no inside to it. Like, we must have missed the Christ in the middle, right? But at the same time, like, most people don't write a book in their lifetime, right? And most people don't have coins made of them, right? So it's kind of like you can exist without having books that you wrote or coins of you, right?
Yeah.
And
especially if he's not a ruler. So, he's definitely not a ruler, even though, as far as I know, Ralph Ellis proposes this idea that he was like some king or stuff.
He was king of Edessa, which I don't hold to that view, although it's okay. So it's not straight up nutso. Well, okay, maybe it is, but it's almost like you take, okay, maybe this happened, and then maybe this happened, and then maybe this happened, but you can see a line, right? But with each branch off of maybe, you kind of
but it
becomes increasingly like speculative, but I've never considered that under the Edessan king theory. You'd expect, but we do see coinage, but it's not.
But he brings up the coinage, as far as I know, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm no expert, but That's
My,
just where I kind of.
my arguments against the Rashidun exactly like that, because we don't have a coinage, but my argument resides in the fact that, well, Rashiduns were the rulers, and rulers must tend to have the coinage. But the Jesus and Muhammad itself is not so clear that they were the rulers, even though the Sunni traditions prescribe them the rulership. And the contemporary Christian sources say that the Muhammad actually was during the conquest of the Jerusalem. He was leading the Jerusalem conquest. And yeah, but I myself is strongly convinced the Parthian involvement in the early Islam is undeniable. I would say that I wouldn't be it for me. It wouldn't be mad to suggest Muhammad himself was a Parthian, not the Arab. But I'm
Mhm.
open to both, because
Yeah.
well, it's more like, let's write our scripture in different language. I think what was behind the Quran, like there was some Parthian texts which they translated, and this is the basis of the Meccan surahs, so-called Pairik surahs, which is just some local poems. I don't know, it was popular in the realm of the northern Iran, and some parts of the Quran written in the response of the current geopolitical events, like what happened back in the day, Great War, and they needed the alliance with the Arabs. I mean, Parthians, and that's why it's so. That's why it's presented in the Quran that we have written it in the Arabian Mubin, the clear Arabic. Like, why would they? Why it would be even in the Quran itself? It's like presuppose that the who is written the Quran is not the Arab. That's why he just articulates like, we have written on your own language so that you can understand. We just presuppose that we in this particular ayah, it's just reiteration of this majestic pluralis, and not we as the authors of the book, obviously.
Oh,
And
that's an interesting idea.
and Arabs are just called very badly in the Quran. Like, Arabs are the shadidul nifaq wal kufr. Like, Arabs are the most strongest on the path of the hypocrisy and the kufr and the hiding of the truth. You would be like, no Arab would write about their own nation like that. Like, so there's some traces of this kind of that this was not written by the Arab hands. Definitely, it's like they tried to convince Arab to accept their teaching.
Yeah.
Arabs were very reluctant, and this is the basis of this Muhammad versus the Qurayshi, this pagan Arabs. So
Yeah. What's who is it? Giorgiani.
yeah, Reza Jorjani,
Yeah, where he says it was actually Salman, the
Salman
Persian, who wrote it.
al-Farsi. But yeah, I think there's just so much like hidden, like intentionally hidden. I think the most evil person is Jarir al-Tabari with his book History of with history, like Tarikh al-Tabari. I think that's the chief liar. Like, if there is like the biggest liar in the Muslim history, it would be Tabari, because I think that there is strong if there is strong evidence that Abbasids tried to rehash the history in order to align it to the Arabic roots, and they definitely wanted that because Abbasids mostly were Arabs by blood. I mean, the rulers, and the Parthian was a big pain in the well-known place for them, because there was Parthian kingdoms on the northern Iran who wouldn't like to be a part of this big empire, and Parthians were very well known for that because they of the hatred toward the Sasanians were exactly because of this imperialistic notions the Sassanid administration had. If there's any evidence that is like history of Islam was rehashed, the author of this rehashment would be definitely at-Tabari. And the at-Tabari Nisba itself, this I think was made up in order to say that, oh, this guy was from Tabaristan, from this northern regions. He knows his stuff. Like his lineage traces back to the northern Iran. So he's like his valuable source. We can deny that he's authority of the history of this particular region, whilst his history was written in Baghdad originally, so
Yeah.
the capital of the Abbasids. So, yeah, I'm just saying that it's not the same case of the Ralph Ellis claim, but
yeah, which I mean,
absence of coinage must came up with this kind of ridiculous idea, but sometimes absence of coinage is a great indication that something wrong going on, especially when we are talking about the caliphs. Caliph's supposed to have his own coin, and they ruled from China to the Africa, and they don't have their minting system. What the hell? I can take this argument for the Jesus, obviously, because Jesus wasn't caliph, he wasn't the monarch, but
yeah, which with excuse me, the Edessan king idea from Ellis, people give him a pretty hard time, but I mean, there's a lot more tenuous ideas that are more mainstream, right? Like well, actually, maybe I take that back because I can't think of any. but I mean, even like the mainline Christian idea, like, is kind of like, I don't know, with the Trinity, and a lot of that is like you'd have to take. I mean, I'm pretty sympathetic to the Gnostic view of things, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, it could be like crazy stuff happens, kind of like with the whole murder mystery things, that the crackpot idea, or what everybody thought was crackpot, is the right one, or none of them are the right one, and it's even something even further crazy out there, right? But
it's all held in secret by the high-class priesthood in the Catholic Church. Like Pope knows everything, basically.
Yeah. All right, here, let's. Okay, so we have some comments. Here's Martin again. Buddha never existed. Yeah, yeah, I mean, yeah, there's a case. I don't know too much about Buddhism, but yeah, I've heard that there's Buddhist
I heard there's
out there.
a big time gap between the earliest Buddhist canon and what to be claimed for the time the Buddha lived in. So,
and let's see, shocked. So I try to shock and amaze my audience here, by saying incendiary stuff all the time. So, I mean, indefensible. I mean, there's so little to go off of. I mean, I can agree with that. In that, there's not a lot of evidence for historicity. So, but I mean, it's kind of like the default position isn't necessarily mythicism, because, I mean, if there's no evidence for historicity, how are you going to make the mythicist position without, a lot of concrete? I mean, we'll have to say maybe we don't know ultimately, but I mean, I look at it like a lot of people say Josephus is wholly made up, but I mean, there's some early Christian something that happened, right?
I always take things as a probability. So when we're talking about the history, it's all about the probabilities. It's like, what more probable, whether Jesus existed or not? And I think there's maybe not so 100% in the terms of mythicism.
Yep. shock and awe. I'm almost maybe like a radio DJ, right? Saying crazy stuff for the ratings. But yeah, historicist. So, but I'm open to being convinced. Like let's see, and Muhammad, being a composite character, is irrefutable. But yes, I mean Jesus, represented in the canonical texts, is a composite character. Muhammad, a composite character. I think there's a lot. I think we know more about Jesus than we do about Muhammad.
It just depends on tradition, because
Yeah,
Jesus of Manichaeans would be like some different Jesus from the Catholic perspective, and same in Islam. Jesus of Sunnism would be a very different person than Jesus of Shiism. So
yeah,
even especially Ismaili Shiism.
yeah. And Muhammad, riding on the back of El Barak to heaven. That there was in Zoroastrianism somebody that rode El Barang to heaven.
Oh, I don't remember.
Alexander the Great did that too. So you would think that has to be a composite, right? Where
it's go in line with the visionary tradition, which I call the visionary one. There's a whole book, Ardavirath Namak, in Zoroastrian literature, which about exactly that, about what you're talking about, as far as I know, this heavenly journey of not the Zartush, but Virath, this hero of this.
Yes, indeed. And Karl-Heinz Oleg, I'm not familiar with him, but Robert Spencer, yeah, he actually came on my channel, Robert Spencer, twice. And yeah, he's not totally convinced himself that Muhammad didn't exist. He's just raising the question that he believes that there's good reason to think he didn't, but I don't think he firmly says he didn't, just there's reason to question. And he brings up his reasons for that. If you're familiar with Robert Spencer, with his book, Did Muhammad Exist?
He basing his book on the classical translation, so everything which is based on classical translation, I just utterly dismiss.
Yep. And then Richard Carrier, you're probably familiar with Richard Carrier, yeah? No, not so much.
He's a mythicist, right?
He's a mythicist, yeah. He's probably like, if we include Dr. Price as a mythicist, him and Dr. Price are only, like, as far as I know, the only people with terminal degrees that hold to mythicism. But yeah, he's kind of fallen into hot water lately with criticizing Dr. Litwell. My bro, how dare you? So when he did, I became like 50 Shades more historicist. Yeah. But there's this thing where he went after Dr. Litwell. So yeah,
was so bad, or what?
No, it would just kind of caused a little thing, because that's what Dr. Carrier does. He kind of lambastes people that disagree with him.
It's like,
yeah, but
and David Litwell is historicist, right? And that's
Dr. Litwell. Yeah, he's historicist, but just like every scholar. Oh, my cats, kitties, come on. Just like every historicist, or just like every scholar, you have to say, yeah, but ultimately we don't know. Just like we're just kind of making our best inference.
And Richard Carrier is
some
like,
things we do know, but a lot of things we don't. But
just the Christ beast.
Oh, Christ is a myth.
Oh, yeah. Like,
which certainly is a myth when we talk about religious figures doing things, right? Like anytime we talk about religion, we're talking about myth. Doesn't mean it's not true. or it doesn't mean it's literally true or not, but it's a myth in terms of it's a religious story. So I can, but I mean, yeah, I mean, it's not something that I've covered on my
It's
channel.
hard to go into the human brains who lived in the past, whether they perceive themselves it as a myth, as some sort of the symbology, or as a real state of affairs of the science back at the days.
Yeah.
It's hard to tell.
Yeah, or, as Dr. Price says, that there may have been a historical Christ, but there isn't anymore.
Mm.
Kind of going into like the onion analogy, like which is the historical one, right? We just don't know. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a tricky topic. Hopefully, because they're like mythicism is so popular, at least, in the channels that I follow, right?
Mm.
That it would be good to, like, no scholar goes into defense of historicity on Christ because it's always just assumed, right?
Mm.
Historicity. It'd be good to see like um a scholar
Yeah.
come on and talk about the reasons why we tend to believe in historicity. I reached out to Chrissy Hansen, who is maybe a PhD. I don't know. I think so, but because I had Dr. Price, because Dr. Price is a little, he said some things back in the day which kind of rubbed people the wrong way, understandably. But now she won't come on my program because I had him on. But someday, her heart
Mm.
will turn. I'll warm her heart, and she'll come on and talk about historicity.
Yeah, I would
So-
like to interview the Price,
or
especially
what?
about the
Yeah, and so
Paul.
oh yeah, so Martin just said have a mythicist on. I mean, I had Dr. Price on. We didn't really talk so much about mythicism, but that's the thing.
Yeah, it was general talk.
But yeah, I could have Martin on and he can talk about, mythicism perhaps. Yeah. But anyway, yeah, but yeah, go ahead. What were you saying?
Yeah, I just said that this was just general talk about your interview with Price, but more about the Gnosticism. It's not about the historicity.
Yeah. Which, yeah, I mean,
Which makes sense because all books of Dr. Price is about Gnosticism. It's more about Gnosticism rather than historicity. Oh, and his proposal of Paul is a Simon Magus.
yeah,
All
I
this.
like that one, which, no, like, no, it's just like, I think of maybe Dr. Price is a little bit like Simon Magus, where, we're flying around to like places you've never seen, and he's showing you all these places, right? And it's like it's just a fun story, like connecting all the everything together. Like, to heck with the rules. Like, let's look at Paul and how Simon Magus, what they have in common together. And it's like when he's talking, it's so convincing, like all the parallels, like, and mimesis is everywhere in religion, And I mean, like, Simon Magus trying to buy his way in, just like Paul bought his way in, right? And like Paul seems to be in the mystery tradition with the whole third heaven thing, and talking about the fruits and
Yeah, and the Gnostic tradition about Paul is all about visionary stuff, this apocalypse of Paul. Yeah,
yeah,
I think it was like so popular back at the day. It was just how it was be like the standard, I would say, just for this eastern parts of the world.
yeah,
They would just basically write down the visionary experience, and that's the basis for the Zoroastrianos, for the Gnostic stuff, for the Zoroastrianism. We just don't have, unfortunately, some the documents from the Sasanian era before the Islam. And I wouldn't be surprised to witness something similar.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. Oh, look at that. He can come on. So yeah, maybe we'll do that at some point. Um, yeah, very good. Um, but yeah, before we go, there's the
Mhm.
whole Ebionite thing,
I
where a lot
think
of people say Ebionite theology in the Quran.
Evionim, right? The poor ones.
Yes. Yeah.
And they just go, oh, they're poor because they lack of understanding of the Christian. Get the hell out of here. They're poor because they were poor, because this was a ascetic movement. Most likely that's why they called Ebionim. Yeah, and well, I'm interested, but there's like little time to research it. To be honest, I'm just researching
Yeah.
Manichaeism. No time because I've because I think it's important to read first the Ginza Rabbah, the Mandaic scripture, in order to come to the Ebionite style, because there will be many similarities, even with Marcionism itself. This kind of idea of let's reject the wine, let's just drink water in the Eucharist instead of the wine. It's go well with this Syncretite ascetic practice, because they would see it as this kind of, it's a bad like alcohol
Mhm.
intoxicant, which is presented in the Quran, by the way, this prohibition of hamar, of the
Yeah.
wine. It's not actually the alcohol or intoxicant, as it's
Yeah.
often translated, very
Yeah.
misleadingly translated, inserting specific theology into the text. And that's why the early Hanafis were so famous, defending this kind of literal reading. No, the Quran prohibits the wine, and that's why this kind of like I don't call it the beer, but some sort of like a beer drink was halal for the early Hanbalis, called nabith. It's a beer from the dates, from the palm dates. So it just,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So there you have it. Beer is halal, but
Mhm.
wine is not so much. Which I guess I'm not too big of a fan of either. But
Yeah, I'm too.
yeah,
That there's even one Hanbali scholar who would say that beer is halal, like contemporary. It's not like some
interesting.
controversial. It would be controversial for the Asharis, for like most of the Sunnis. They would say that, oh, you are just such a heretic to say this thing. But
Yeah.
it's not that big of a problem for the Ham. It's just must not contain like some sort of a percentage, as far as I know. So you not go
Yeah.
like full bad mode after drinking the beer.
Yeah. Which I mean makes sense because I think in some portion of the Quran, don't they say uh, alcohol is good for medicine? Isn't
Oh, it
there?
says that there's some good stuff in it, in Hammer, and there is bad stuff in it, but bad overcomes the good one. Like, and I don't know whether this kind of understanding of the Sunnis which you trying to present right now is the correct reading of this verse, maybe, because Hammer is
Ah,
for my understanding is a wine, it's not the intoxicant. And
yeah.
maybe there's some apology against the wine, I don't know.
Yeah.
Especially.
Yeah. I mean, that's an interesting idea with the whole, like, maybe to be humble a
Yeah.
little bit, with, that like that's a recurring thing, like men shouldn't wear gold,
Mhm.
um, and you shouldn't have flowing robes if you're a man.
Mhm.
If you've heard of those, I mean, that's not in the Quran; those are hadith, but that's a recurring theme is humility. So if it's wonder like you shouldn't be a big fancy pants drinking wine, if that's part of it.
Yeah, maybe, and then Manichaeism too. That you just have to have like, if you are and like get this Nazarene war, if you're just get into ascetic practice, then you're only allowed to have one cloth for the 1 year, and similar stuff you can find in Mandaic tradition, overlapping like with the Manichaeanism, like vegetarianism, like hardcore vegetarianism. It's not like this kind of light version. Let's not eat the animals. Like every single living thing you eat is the part of the. If you are taking it from the nature, it's the sin, and that's why they would use like clay instead of the wood to build their own houses. And yeah, but I'm not familiar with the Ebionim, what's Ebionite tradition. I'm not well versed, because I think it's mostly come from the heresiologists, this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think so as well. That I think, our only references to it are from heresiologists. Well, just like Marcion, right? Against heresies, that kind of, but yeah, it's a mystery. All right, brilliant. So, do we have anything else? Maybe we'll start to sum up here.
Yes, like sum up. I'm currently like making this video. Already made the text for the video about the reconstruction of Surah Abu Lahab, and it will be posted on my site, my personal website, gnosticquran.com. So feel free to enjoy the stuff.
Yep, absolutely. And to anybody watching, subscribe Gnostic Quran on YouTube. And I haven't checked out, I don't think, GnosticQuran.com, but I'll have to check it out.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. We feel good leaving it there. All right. Brilliant. All right. So thank you so much for coming on. And thank you, everybody, for watching and for your questions and comments.
Yeah.
And
have a nice day.
great day. Yep. Have an awesome day, everybody. Bye-bye.